Chapter 1, Beggar. Arc 1, Return of the Blood. That is why Baudrillard considers things and requirements as false symbols. He criticized Marx's labor theory of value, believing he had fallen into the trap of capitalism and political economy. He then even proposed his own idea of political economy. Wu Qiren finished his presentation. He opened up his last slide and nodded his thanks to the teacher and his classmates. Upon the teacher's signal, he left the podium and awaited the next classmate's presentation. Thales. The next moment, former postgraduate student Wu Qiren woke up from his dream. He was curled up, lying in a cold hollowed-out hole in the wall. He could feel the cold wind blowing from the gaps. Wu Qiren sighed. It had been 5 years, but he still dreamed of his past life. His previous life was boring, but it was definitely better than his current miserable situation. Thales. Thales. A large hand stretched into the hole in the wall and grabbed Wu Qiren's ear before roughly pulling him out from that small and damaged place. It was a dilapidated house. The bright stars in the night could be seen in the sky through the half-collapsed rooftop, but the positions of the stars looked unfamiliar. Wu Qiren could not hold out against that rough hand as he was only 7 years old. He was dragged on the rough brick floor. His knees hurt from the friction against the floor, but he did not make a single noise. This was because the cruel Quide was especially intolerant with the wailing of children. It was said that he once broke the legs of a 6-year-old girl who had cried for food. I've already asked Rick. The money you collected was 5 coppers less than last week. You stashed some away. Quide was angry and looked as red as the mane of a lion. His protruding nose made him look even more ferocious. Wu Qiren was flung to the ground. His gray eyes looked at the holes in the walls. The 5 beggars living with him in the same house, ranging between age 4 to 10, all shuddered at Quide's roar. At the innermost hole was the smallest girl. The short-haired girl bit hard on her left hand, her face turning red. She looked at Wu Qiren, who was on the floor in fear. At the hole beside her was Ned, a 6-year-old boy who screamed with fright. The girl was Korea. Wu Qiren understood the reason she was afraid. In fact, Wu Qiren's luck that week was good. He, currently known as the beggar Thales, had obtained 37 coppers this week. It was 18 coppers more than the previous week. However, he only surrendered 14 coppers to Quide, the head of the beggar trade in a Blackstreet Brotherhood. The rest of the money, along with 2 years of coppers that he had saved, was delivered to Grove Pharmacy. With the help of the kind-hearted worker Yanni, he bought a course of medicine for typhoid fever. Thales fed the medicine to the 4-year-old Korea. Having typhoid fever at her age would be fatal without any medicine. Over the last 5 years, Thales relived his past memories from the age of 2 to his current age of 7. From an ignorant child, he began recalling his past life bit by bit. The memories appeared fragmented and disordered. Even then, during these 5 years, he began to gain more and more awareness as compared to the initial fuzzy stage. He had a profound feeling when he saw others meet their end. There were those who died from illness, those who fell to their deaths, those who drowned, those who were hanged, and those who were beaten to death. Thales even saw a crying beggar suffocated to death by a supernatural power from 10 meters away once. The human trafficking business of the Blackstreet Brotherhood had no bottom line or principles. Even if they were gangsters, they needed time to hammer out rules and order. It had only been 10 years since they started and expanded. Additionally, the Blood Bottle Gang, also known as the Nobles of the Gangsters, in its 90 years history, had blood debts with its enemy. Most of the time when witnessing these deaths, Thales felt helpless. Even he himself avoided a fatal end more than once by relying on scattered memories of his previous life. Just like his current situation. Quide was itching for a fight and was in high spirits. The look in his eyes was so characteristic of sadistic gangsters, vicious, cruel, and sadistic. I did not stash any money. It is almost winter. Fewer people are passing by these 3 districts. Thales got up from the ground as he quickly thought of and gave an excuse. Slap. What greeted him was a ruthless slap in the face. Thales fell back to the ground. Hand over the money before I beat you up. Or I could beat you up first until you hand over the money. Take your pick. Obviously, Quide did not want to hear his excuse. The leader of the Brotherhood probably just wanted to extort for some beer money from them. Another possibility was that he simply wanted to beat somebody up. You can also be stubborn. I love stubborn children the most. Quide grinned hideously as he started rubbing his fists. Looking at the large fists in front of him, Thales knew that Quide would not let him go even if he did not say anything. Quide had tortured a beggar from the 5th room to death the previous month. Thales held his red and swollen face as he quickly thought to himself. Normally, Quide did not care about the accounts. When night fell, he would proceed to the subway Sunset Pub to hang around or drink. He would not know how many My Dear coppers was 1 Mindy's silver, let alone how much the beggars under his care had turned in. This was all done by his deputy, the steady and dependable Rick. Even the shrewd Rick knew that the beggars earned about 8 coppers per person every week. Somebody had told on them. That was the only possibility. Thales looked around at the group of beggars. After getting his money from a rich female noble, he had returned directly to the abandoned houses. The beggars in the house must have seen this. In such a grim environment, a child's heart could become even more terrifying than what an adult could imagine. Quide started to kick again. Thales secretly protected his abdomen with his elbow. He used some of his strength and pretended to be in unbearable pain from the kick. He could not make any sound as Quide loved the screams of children. I will speak, Thales said with a fearful expression. Don't hit me. That depends on my mood. Quiet looked around and saw the other 5 beggars cowering in fear. This made him feel satisfied as his authority was respected. Wednesday morning, I met a noblewoman. She gave me 10 coppers. Thales spoke as he trembled and hid in a corner. I knew it. Begging? It was stolen, right? Nobody can hide the truth from me, especially a little thief like you. Quiet rubbed his palms viciously as he prepared for the next round of beatings. Take out the money. Without even waiting for Quiet to raise his eyebrows, Thales then added. But I went to Red Street Market. Red Street Market? Quiet lowered his raised hand a little. You went to the Blood Bottle Gang's territory? Yes. We cannot earn much money in our place anymore. Other than those in the Brotherhood, the brilliant and brave, and those with a specific purpose, there is none that would enter the 3 districts near the shady street without being cautious. Even the guards from the city defense team with swords and shields were unwilling to enter such a place full of crime. I got so much money the first day but the Blood Bottle Gang did not appear. I thought there would be an opportunity the next day. Idiot. Quiet fiercely kicked Thales. Thales saw Coria tremble at a distance. He then heard Quiet shouted, think about it. How could the Blood Bottle's territory be such an easy pick? Thales recoiled back and really trembled. Yes. The next afternoon, the Blood Bottle Gang caught me and hung me up. I said I was lost but they did not believe me. I gave them all my money and they still did not let me go. You good for nothing. How did you escape? Quiet spat ruthlessly. After that, I said I was Boss Quiet's subordinate and they laughed loudly. What? Quiet clenched his fist and grabbed Thales' worn-out burlap collar. He raised Thales from the corner of a wall and asked, what were they laughing at? Thales shook his head and replied, I did not understand what they said. Quiet fiercely looked at him. Speak quickly. Thales showed a terrified expression. He trembled and said, amongst them was a bald person. He said to spare the child since the child belongs to Quiet and that Quiet really needs children. Before Thales could finish, Quiet had flung him against a wall. He tried his best to protect his head and chest. He used the back of his body to endure the impact from the wall. He then immediately turned his back to Quiet and withstood the blows of fury. After taking the blows for a moment, he tilted his back a little to cushion the intensity of the blows. Son of a, this bald, Sven, how did he know? I will kill you, useless idiot. Mad with rage, Quiet yelled repeatedly as he continued kicking Thales, but only a few words were discernible. The children in the other holes in the wall were horrified to see Thales beaten up. However, they tightly covered their mouths and dared not say anything. Thales kept enduring Quiet's enraged kicks that vented his anger. At the very least, now Quiet would not ask where the extra money went. Besides that, although he was terrifying, an enraged Quiet was much safer than a Quiet who was gleefully torturing some kids. Thales' words were half-truths. Thales did go to the Red Street Market but he hid at the dark corners of the alleys and watched his surroundings carefully. He did encounter a noblewoman who wore clothes of goose feathers. By her side were 20 swordsmen of eradication. This was when he came out to beg. It was the reason the Blood Bottle Gang did not interrupt him. Thales also obtained 12 coppers from the noble. He was not stupid enough to steal it in front of 20 swordsmen of eradication. Thales did not wait for the noble to leave, he disappeared into the crowd, never returning. As for the bald Sven, Thales had never actually met him before. He only knew that the man was the head debt collector of the Blood Bottle Gang. Quiet himself was once a thug for the Brotherhood. That was until Quiet provoked the wrong person and had a lower part of his body broken. This information was a secret. Thales found out about this at the Brotherhood's large house when he overheard the assassins, Leork and Felicia, secretly laugh at Quiet. Once Quiet finished venting and cursing the bald Sven, he took out a bottle of wine and left grumbling. The back of Thales' clothes had been torn. His back looked bluish-purple. Because Thales avoided getting hit directly and had turned sideways, some parts of his body bled from being scratched. The pain came, throbbing in waves. Blood flowed to the ground. Thales could feel a burning pain. Perhaps because he had not been beaten in a very long time, his muscles felt as though they were burning. Ever since transmigrating into this world, getting beaten up, becoming hungry, falling sick and feeling cold were all common experiences. However, ever since Thales gradually recovered his memories as Wu Qiren, by staying cautious and also relying on his previous experience, he had not been viciously beaten like this for a long time. When Quiet's voice faded away, the other 5 children crawled out from their holes. They proficiently carried the weak Thales to the yard. The 10-year-old big boy Cindy scooped out water from a jar with a worn-out bowl. The crippled Ryan and the black-faced Kellet were both 8 years old. They struggled to gather dead branches and weeds. They then started a fire with flints. The 6-year-old yellow-haired Ned and the youngest Coria gathered a few strange leaves. They chewed the leaves and then rubbed it on Thales' badly bruised back. Thales endured the pain as he tried to find a way to distract himself. He turned to see a crying Coria and a dejected Ned. He then tried to speak in a calm tone. It is all right. Ned, I do not blame you. Ned suddenly raised his head and looked alarmed. The other 4 children gazed at him. How did you know? Ned could not help but feel guilty and horrified. When Thales was being beaten up by Quiet, the 3 older children, though afraid, were gazing at the sight unwaveringly. The remaining 2 were Coria and Ned. One covered her face and did not dare to raise her head. The other looked at the wall and occasionally glanced in horror. Coria's typhoid medicine was the sole purpose of those coppers. Coria would definitely not divulge that. Thales was not sure if it was Ned, but now there was no doubt. He tried to squeeze out a smile. It is all right. Quide will not pursue this matter anymore. I. Ned blushed in shame. He looked at Thales' back as his tears ran down. I did not manage to obtain any money this week. I also did not dare to go and steal. He sobbed. Rick did not say anything, but Quide was very unhappy. He said if this continued, he would sell me to the desert where the barren bone people will eat me. I was so scared that I told him that you came back with a lot of coppers on one of the days. I thought that this way they would not. Quide then sent me back and said that he would come tonight. Coria's face turned red too. The herbal medicine in her hands trembled and a few drops of blood dripped down to the floor from Thales' back. Thales moaned in silence. The diminishing burning sensation of pain was once again aggravated by Coria's actions. Ryan glared angrily at Ned, causing Ned to lower his head even more. Kellett looked at Ned with a surprised expression and then looked at Thales. Only Cinti remained silent and continued to bring the water over. This kid was only 6. Thales thought to himself. This child was so innocent. Faced with Quide, he was terrified and, in the commotion, he had uttered the wrong words. It is all right, Ned, Coria. Thales felt his injury getting better. He gently held Ned's hand. But, you have seen it too, what Quide is capable of. Ned sobbed a little in terror. Thales looked at him solemnly and said, next time, if you all cannot find enough money, just tell me. I will think of a way. When compared to Quide, only we are in the same group. Ned cried uncontrollably. His words were interrupted by his sobbing. Thales. So sorry. Thales silently watched Ned crying nonstop. Finally, he turned his head around and inhaled lightly. It is all right now, Ned. Thales sighed and took the bowl of water from Cinti for a sip. Don't worry. I will find a way. Even then. He looked at the other 5 children. Even the recovering Coria still looked terrified. Tomorrow I must find a way to get more money. He thought to himself. At the Sunset Temple of the Eternal Star City, after the prayers at sunset, a trainee priest who was cleaning the altar stopped her movements. She looked in surprise at the lamp containing eternal oil. Ever since she started taking care of the altar, she had never seen this lamp being used. It was a lamp that had never gained attention. That lamp suddenly lit up with a bright yellow flame. The flame suddenly turned vigorous and red like the color of blood. An elder priest noticed the trainee's unusual demeanor. She shouted resentfully and chided the trainee before shifting her attention to the altar. But when she noticed the unusually lit lamp, she screamed. Nia! Quick! Inform the ritual master. The elder's surprise could not be concealed. She trembled and scurried over to that lamp, raised her right palm and then her left palm, as she prepared to pray. What is going on? This was the first time the trainee Nia saw the respected priest lose her composure. It was to the extent that she herself was influenced. Did I make a mistake? But I did not touch the lamp. But what do I tell the ritual master? Someone secretly came by and lit up the lamp by the altar? Nia asked, feeling flustered. No. The elder kept staring at the lamp. Her praying hands continued changing their positions. This light, even if you search across the 2 continents of Errol and its countless islands, there is only one person who can light it up. That person would determine the future of this kingdom. Chapter 2, Nervous Rick. How did he end up like this from drinking? In the slums of the lower city 2nd district, Quide's deputy, Mayor Rick, looked at the wine bottle in front of him with disgust. Quide was so drunk that he was like a heap of mud. Rick waved his hand and had 2 members of the Brotherhood carry the man down. Lock him in a room for a day. Release him when he is sober. For him to drink to this state would mean that he could not do much to the child. Rick gave a mysterious smile. Mayor Rick was a person who preferred others to address him by his surname. Quide fell in ranking from the thug's chief to the beggar's chief after some setback. In comparison to the sluggish Quide, Rick was an ambitious and capable member of the Brotherhood. He once studied at an accounting academy at Shocker City, south of the kingdom. If it was not because his scribe father had made a mistake, Rick could be working in the department of a city or even as a treasurer of certain households. He could also go even further and become a merchant of an industry. After some time, he would buy a title and join the upper ranks of the constellation. 300 years ago, a clan with the sunflower symbol, Sucator, had risen just like this and was now a prominent noble clan in the kingdom. But even though he fell from grace and joined a gang and thus was forever severed from the path of a noble, Rick also believed that his words would have more sway compared to his colleagues whose heads were only filled with muscle and women. When the Brotherhood expanded to the southern coasts of the kingdom, Rick, who happened to pass by, was recruited. He utilized his talents and successfully sold a few slaves. The higher-ranked members of the Brotherhood took notice of him and promoted him. They then dispatched him to Eternal Star City, the capital of the kingdom, the heart of Constellation and the bright pearl of the western part of the continent. They allowed him to manage the Brotherhood and the accounts of the beggars. Rick knew that although he had been sent as Quide's deputy and accountant, the beggar's business had already been entrusted to him by the Brotherhood. He looked at his boss Quide, who was once a well-known thug in the 3rd Street for being skilled at using swords and axes. Quiet had now become trash that sought dignity from beggars. If Quiet was not the son of a high-ranked member of the Brotherhood, he would have long been drowned and left to rot. On top of that, most of the beggar's losses were caused by Quiet. Naturally and fortunately, Quiet's father had given Rick a lot of bribe money every month. This was how Rick could still profit. With such a son, Quiet's father would have immediately lost influence and power were he not an arms-dealing powerhouse. What would the outcome of an underworld bigshot that lost his influence be? Rick shook his head and watched Quiet leave. The beggar's business appeared petty and lowly, especially when compared to smuggling weapons and drugs, the trade of eternal oil and crystal drop ores, as well as debt collection. However, Rick believed that this was his opportunity. The Brotherhood had grown quickly, but human trafficking had always been its major source of profits. They dealt with everything including infants, elderly, humans, elves and even intelligent beings from the Magic Empress territory. However, the most crucial thing was the origins of the Brotherhood's member. Among them, Widow Blackheart Bears was responsible for gathering and raising them. She would also sell some of them. The older ones would be sent to Rick to be tempered into beggars. When they grew up, the teenagers would be trained as thugs by Ironsheet Lock and prostitutes by Felicia the Unfaithful. They may also go to the other leaders and be disciplined into becoming members of the Brotherhood. This was why Rick, who ran the beggar business, thought he was working at the foundation of the Brotherhood's business and the future of the Brotherhood's transportation lifeline. It was also an information network in the capital. Thinking about it, he could identify all the promising and young future prospects for the Brotherhood. He can then obtain favors for the future. This went to show that Mayor Rick was an ambitious person. Besides that, Rick was very excited when he thought of something. This was Eternal Star City. It was the capital of Constellation, the second largest kingdom on the western part of the continent. It was also the birthplace of the Blackstreet Brotherhood. They can surely see that working here was like being a representative for the big shots. This also meant that there would be opportunities for promotion. Naturally, the chances for there to be a bad accident was also quite high. I am lucky. Rick clasped his hands behind his back as he looked at the drunk Quiet from afar with his eyebrows raised. I am lucky that this guy is a walking disaster. Under the moonlight, Rick turned and looked at the dozen or so abandoned houses. He knew that there were many beggars in each one. These seedlings were important chips for his future advancement. One example was the black-haired Thales from the 6th house. 2 years ago, the caretaker bears sent him here. She had displayed a different attitude towards the child. The child, who was 8 years old at most, was clever and crafty. He managed to act out a play and begged for money. A cute child who was beaten up by other children and had his money and food taken away. When he hid at a corner to weep alone, the ladies passing by could not help but give him compensation. Rick found that he was unlike other beggars who cried hoarsely to the extent that others felt depressed. We need more people who can use their brains in the Brotherhood. When this child grows up, he would definitely climb higher. I should give him a reward and make him feel grateful. Naturally, without a contrast between the rewards, people will not feel grateful. This was also why when the boy from Thales' house claimed that Thales was secretly in possession of some money, Rick urged Quiet to investigate the reason. When Thales was almost beaten to death by Quiet, Rick would appear and stop him. He was even willing to antagonize Quiet if necessary. That was all Quiet was good for. Thales would then treat Rick as a patron. Rick did not care about whether all the money the beggars earned was handed over. This was what only short-sighted people would care about. Compared to a few coppers, Rick understood that human relationship was a more important property. But this Thales was too clever. Rick knew that Quiet would torture Thales to death regardless of whether he possessed the money, which would only be worse if he did have money. However, the boy found a way to escape disaster. According to common understanding, the spirited Quiet would meticulously punish the disobedient children to foster talent regardless of whether they were actually disobedient. It does not matter. What must be done had to be done. If the effect was not good and it failed, a reason could be found for Quiet to beat him up. Rick went to the 6th house and walked across the ruined door. He then saw weeds at the yard and Thales gasping for breath as he lied down on the ground. Next to him were a few children smearing something onto him. My God! Children under the age of 10 knew how to grow and use earth dragon leaves. Only experienced gang members and the poor that lived for a very long time possessed the know-how to use this herb as a cheap cure for injuries. Ah! Mr. Rick! The crippled Ryan noticed Rick's arrival. His experience of having one leg broken had made him more sensitive to the surrounding environment. It had been less than an hour after Quiet was gone, the fear in the yard had yet to have subsided. The informant, Ned's face was covered in tears. Kellett was covering her black face. The eldest, Cinti, flinched. The youngest, Coria, even screamed from fear. Bears had once said that this person had a noble inheritance and was most likely a beautiful woman in the future. She must not be ruined. Profits would come after she was trained by Felicia. It was a pity that the beggars must be handed over at the age of 10, or at latest at the age of 12. It would be great if I could keep her until 15. 13 would be fine as well. Mr. Rick. Thales interrupted Rick's subtle thoughts. He turned his head with difficulty. The injury on his back caused him to grimace in pain. Ah. Thales. I am sorry, Rick sighed and showed a compassionate expression. I could not stop Quiet. I am only his deputy. I also cannot offend his backer. I could only come here quietly after that. While being cautiously watched by the other children, Rick squatted down and carefully examined Thales' injuries. Fortunately, he was not so rough today. Otherwise. Mr. Rick. I am fine. Thales struggled genuinely. I am sorry. The money I earned last week was actually. Forget about the money. Rick took the worn-out bowl from Cinty's hands. He threw away the water and placed a few earth dragon leaves in it. He then picked up a stone and started to grind it. You were sent here the moment you began to be aware of your surroundings. These few years, I watched all of you grow from a mere child trembling from the cold into a rough and thick-haired child. For me, all of you are more important than a few coppers, Rick said with a pained expression. At this age, all of you are not even supposed to be begging, but these are the rules of the Brotherhood. Mr. Rick. Thales looked as though he felt touched by Rick's sentiments. He then tightened his fists. Come. Use the stones to grind the leaves. It is better than chewing it. Rick smeared the contents onto his hand and then smeared it on Thales' back. Next to him, Kellet bit her lip and whimpered. Thank you, Mr. Rick, said Coria in a soft tone. It would be great if you were in charge of us instead of Quide. Don't let Quide hear this. Rick laughed helplessly. To be honest, I am very afraid of him. The other children also laughed. Rick knew that people would accept another person easily when a common ground and a sense of humor was shown. Thank you very much, Mr. Rick. Thales earnestly said. He knew that he was very mature in the eyes of many and did not need to show a childlike side. Rick nodded. Protect yourself well. You are a smart kid. I believe you can do it. Oh right. Rick seemed to suddenly remember something. He returned the bowl to Ned and took out a purse from his waist. He then handed it over to the bewildered Cinty. I need to hand over money to the higher-ups every month and do not have much. Here are 30 coppers. Go to Grove Pharmacy at the intersection between Twilight District and the Lower City District and buy some medicine. If the price of the medicine has not yet increased, the amount of money here should be enough. Naturally, the money would not be enough. Rick thought to himself. He had been to the pharmacy a week ago and the price had just hiked. When the children discovered that the money was not enough, they would think it was caused by a temporary price hike. If they did not have enough money, they would need to beg for more. This way, they would not have enough for next week's quota. After that, be careful when you leave to buy the medicine. Do not let others, especially Quide, find out. Rick said as he stood up. Of course, Quide would find out. Rick thought. If they do not buy the medicine, that would be even better. Quide would find out that they were hiding money. The corners of Rick's mouth raised. At that moment, I can obtain all of their loyalty. Mr. Rick. Coria looked at the purse in Cinty's hand as tears were about to fall from her eyes. You are really a good person. Ned bit his lips and nodded. Even the eldest, Cinty, was touched and weighed the purse in his hands. Rick sighed and waved his hand. No. I am the one that should apologize. I could only do this for you. Mr. Rick, Thales was lying down on the ground and hesitantly looked at Rick. I wonder. Rick raised his eyebrows. What's wrong? I heard that when we grow up, we would be sent elsewhere to be trained. Thales asked cautiously as though not wanting to offend Rick. In that case, I wonder if we could work for you once our training is complete. Hearing this, Kellet, Ned, and Coria looked at Rick expectantly. Rick felt as though his heart grew. Score. Faster than I expected. Ha ha. This? Rick gave a smile. Don't look at me like this now. I am an ideal man in the Brotherhood. Rick smiled and bent down to touch Thales' hair, appearing more intimate. The people under me are the best and the strongest in the Brotherhood. This is just my truth. Rick added in his heart. That is why, if you all want to work for me, you must work hard. The children nodded with hope. Thales was no exception. I am going now. Thales and the rest of you. Rick turned his head around, showing the side of his face. The next time this happens, secretly come over and inform me. Although I cannot stop him directly, I could look for some trouble and prevent him from approaching. After Rick was finished, he showed his white teeth that gleamed under the moonlight and left without looking back. Mr. Rick is such a good person. Ned's face was in a mess from the tears. Not like that Quide. Coria nodded and seemed content as though she was eating sweets. But, the crippled and fearful Ryan hesitantly said, I've always felt that Rick is more terrifying than Quide. So, you are a coward. Ryan the coward. How are you going to earn money like this? Only Thales looked calm after Rick left. When he saw Cinty counting the 30 coppers in the purse one by one, Thales breathed out a sigh. He still felt pain on his back. He knew that medicine would be good for his injury. However, Thales had gone to Grove Pharmacy yesterday morning. When he took the typhoid medicine from Yanni, he had heard her complain about her stingy boss raising the price. The price of medicine for injuries had gone up to 35 coppers. It was 5 coppers more than the amount Rick had given them. However, he also knew the daughter of the boss of the Sunset Pub. That was how he knew an important point. Rick was in charge of all of Quide's expenses at the pub. But I would also need to hand over the money to the higher-ups every month and do not have much. Rick's voice resounded in his ears and he could no longer bear to look at the purse filled with coppers. The other beggars had already forgotten their fears and started being noisy. Only Thales frowned. With difficulty, he turned to look at his own bruised back. He then sighed heavily. This damn world. Rick went to the 10th house. There was an 8-year-old named Kalak who was young but ruthless. Rick pressured Karak into joining him when he suddenly felt his neck turn cold. This was his innate ability. When he was absolutely calm, a little distraction would cause it to fail, his neck would feel cold when there was a living thing 5 meters near him. That was all. However, he was not a warrior. Even if he was a warrior, his ability was useless compared to those in the military with psionic abilities, the powerful swordsmen and knights of eradication, and even those mysterious mystics. Even trainees in the temple could push him down. However, Rick felt that one day, this skill would save his life. Just like this very moment. Rick quickly turned and looked around under the moonlight. At the same time, he put his left hand into his pocket and took out a compact but deadly crossbow. The moonlight was bright. The streets were empty and there was nowhere to hide. Yet, there was nothing. Rick took a deep breath and kept himself absolutely calm. He could feel the cool feeling behind his neck persist. Was it a rat in the sewers? Rick ran quickly to 3 different locations and the feeling remained. This made him reject his assumption. What kind of rat would follow me for 20 meters after running towards 3 different directions? Rick started to become more frightened. Rick believed he should not have ventured out alone even though he was merely visiting the abandoned houses in the Brotherhood's territory. He should have brought along 20 guards, with each of them wielding a mystic gun in each hand. Just like the big shot of the drug business Lasensfisher, he always brought 30 people with him whenever he went out. If I had enough money, I should have hired 2 swordsmen of eradication or a psionic warrior. Maybe even a mystic. Forget it, mystics were too scary. Nay, Rick. You must be calm. He told himself. In the future, you would be in charge of Eternal Star City. Even the underground people of Constellation were calm. You must stay calm. Rick turned around and calmly backtracked as though he was jogging. Did I offend someone? Does someone want my life? Was there something interesting in this neighborhood? He jogged away for hundreds of meters under the moonlight. There was nobody around him, yet his neck still felt cold. Chapter 3, Ghost. Pardon my coming here presumptuously. But if the news from the Sunset Temple, if the information is reliable. The right hand of the gray-haired middle-aged noble trembled slightly. He held his left chest and bowed deeply. Please allow me to personally settle this matter for you. You are quite well informed, old friend. It is not yet confirmed but that lamp in the Sunset Temple has lit. Looks like it is quite close by. Beside the blazing fire, a robust figure lowered his right hand near his chin and somberly said, I have already dispatched Yodel. He is better than I die at being inconspicuous. You know how important this information is. Even Lycia immediately sealed off the altar in the name of the Oracle. That is why I cannot risk unnecessary exposure. I would only dispatch you in secret after there is absolute confirmation. Of course, of course. The gray-haired middle-aged noble concealed his excitement with difficulty. If that time comes, I will wholeheartedly serve you. The robust figure sighed. I should be more excited than you when I heard this news. But I don't know why. I am feeling very calm. Rick did not know how he ended up returning to the headquarters of the Brotherhood. The cold feeling at his neck was still there. When he saw the Blackstreet headquarters, the 2 elite guards were playing knife games at the entrance. When he reached just outside the building, some shadowy figures were on guard, keeping watch. He entered the building and saw Powerhouse Morris behind the large iron table, examining the account books, and Felicia who had a disgusted expression. Her proposal to raise the expenses of the brothel was rejected. He finally felt relieved. Even the assassin Leork who had always been on bad terms with him seemed amiable sitting at the dining table in the candlelight. Without noticing, the cold feeling at his neck disappeared as though it was never there. Even Rick wondered if he had been too nervous. He talked to Morris who was in charge of human trafficking that he suspected someone had been following him. Leork laughed and spat out a mouthful of wine. It extinguished the flames from the candle on the table. Felicia gave a huge yawn and tightened her large bosom. The look in her eyes became even more despicable. Morris noticed Rick's cold sweat and weird look. He then patted Rick's shoulder. He told Rick not to overwork and watch less of Dark Knight Temple's dramas. Rick was also told to wait for Dr. Ramon to give him some calming prescriptions when he returned from his call. Shit. Rick knew it was difficult for others to believe in his special ability, let alone an assassin who had followed him from the abandoned houses to Blackstreet. This person had followed him for an entire kilometer and remained unseen as well as not taking any action. However, Rick subconsciously believed that this person was real. After he returned to his room and lay down, he recalled the events in the tailing encounter that night. Even though he was usually very paranoid, he could not help but think to himself, was I really too nervous? Rick calmed down again and tried to use his ability again. Everything was fine. The back of his neck felt comfortable. All right. I was probably paranoid. But suddenly, the hair-raising chill in the neck struck again. Fuck. I can't sleep anymore. Rick suddenly jumped out of bed. He pulled out a box from under the bed. Inside the box was a Seagull 6 mystic gun that needed to be carried with both hands. Feeling nervous, he stuck to the walls and carefully walked out to the hallway and listened carefully. The hallway was full of lamps using eternal oil that would never extinguish. The hallway was very brightly lit, but there was still nobody around. At a distance, a sentry on duty just came out of the toilet and was walking back. As though scratching at an itch, he pulled the crotch of his leather armor as he walked past Rick. At the end of the hallways, Leork and Felicia shouted their licentious cries as usual. Damn. May this shameless couple break his penis after using too much force. Rick cursed loudly. The Brotherhood member from earlier had the same feeling. He turned around and nodded to Rick. Their eyes locked as a sense of understanding appeared between the two. Rick then saw the member scratch the crotch of his armor painfully. Meanwhile, the other party looked at him trying very hard to carry the mystic gun and leaning against the wall. Both of them turned around awkwardly and went back to their original locations. Rick rubbed the back of his neck. Shit. This ability must not be working properly. If a skilled elite of the enemy could sneak into the Brotherhood HQ undetected, holding the mystic gun would be pointless. Powerhouse Morris' ability would also be useless. Time to sleep. Thales' back injuries looked bad, but it was not serious. This was because he was able to stand and walk again by the third day. Yes, a famous person's attributes would be heavenly gifted. While lining up, Thales sighed as he looked at the abandoned houses with broken walls. He then received the rye bread and wild herbs from the thug Pearson and started to eat it. He had unfortunately been born in such a place. By your side is a sharp branch. You must be the one who cut my hand. It is not me. My hand was also hurt last night. All of us had our hands hurt. It must be the people from the 8th house. They envy our gains from yesterday. So, it was them. We from the 14th house were also injured at night. They do not want us to go out and pickpocket. Thales yawned as he lazily listened to the beggars from the other houses. The argument developed into a fight. Beside these beggars was a crowd cheering. This happened until the thugs stopped them. Thales sighed as he swallowed the last mouthful of the awful food, then clapped his hands as he called out to the beggars from the 6th house. Time to work. That day was Tuesday. The 6th house's begging went smoothly. For more business, they went near the sentry post, which was located at Western City Gate. The recent week seemed to be the celebration of the sunset god. However, there was a rumor that there was an oracle command to seal off the altar. This led to many believers entering the city from the west that week. They climbed the city walls and prayed to the setting sun as atonement for not being able to pray to the sunset goddess' local representative. Before the guards' angry glares graduated to physical obstacles, Thales had successfully stolen a luminous moon deity statue made of black wood from a street vendor with the help of Coria and Ryan. The street vendor had paid too much attention to his wallet. Go away, bastards. So, when Ryan and Coria were busy haggling with him for some stuff, Thales stretched out his hand and took the package behind him. The market price of the luminous moon deity statue was at least 50 coppers. Naturally, the statue should not see the light of day and could only be sold through the Brotherhood channel. The veterans in the Brotherhood would know that they were just beggars and thieves. They would then push down the buying price, and if it were anything valuable they would even fight over it. Earning 5 coppers from it was already good. However, the smallest mosquitoes were still food even though tiny. When Thales and the others returned to the abandoned houses, they saw Rick patrol the place. But he was not the usual calm and amiable self. Instead, he hurriedly admonished the guards with a few words and then disappeared. Is Mr. Rick in trouble? The hungry Coria bit her fingers, her stomach rumbling away. They had gone far and returned home late. Fortunately, Thales had quite a good relationship with the thug distributing the meals, Pearson. He often bribed him a little and then the other side would agree to keep some rice for them. It is probably Quide. That guy really knows how to create problems. Kellett replied. His stomach also cried out. Hearing this name, Ryan and Ned trembled. Kids. There is no more food tonight. When the 6 entered, they could not see a soul in the dining yard. In the distance, Pearson, who was in charge of getting food for them, waved his hand. Don't look at me. I also can't do anything about it. Pearson shook his head when faced with 6 angry children with no energy to ask questions and ignored them. Rick had ordered us to rest earlier and moved our schedules ahead. Thales frowned and touched his empty belly. He started thinking about whether to sneak into the thug's sentry posts and steal some food at night. He then looked at the other 5 anxiously waiting for food inside. He took out the luminous moon statue from his pocket. Finally, with Thales' persuasion, the luminous moon statue was used to trade with Pearson for the food he had initially prepared for himself, 2 strips of dog meat, 4 halves of rye bread and half a bowl of black pine vegetable. Recently, Rick and Quide are rather edgy. While the other children ate, Pearson told Thales a piece of information before he left. Quide's temper is getting worse by the day. He kept cursing some damn baldy all day, but he had always been like that. However, Rick has become weird especially in the last 2 days. According to those in the headquarters. At this moment, Pearson looked around and then whispered to Thales. He got tangled up with a ghost. Thales watched Pearson leave as he bit into the unpalatable rye bread. However, when one is hungry, the rye bread would be particularly delicious. Thales silently pondered. I wonder what happened to Rick to end up running into a ghost. As for what made Quide in a bad mood. Thales swallowed the bread. Looks like I need to keep a low profile for now. Rick became nervous again. 2 days ago, he had thought that his special ability made a mistake. That was until this morning when he opened up the register to prepare for the beggar's supplies. At that time, he had confirmed that his special ability did not make a mistake. Rick was an ambitious person. He had believed that to achieve his ambition, he needed to start working on the small details, like the daily habits. One example was that he would never write his plans and travel itinerary on paper. Another example was that hairs would be placed at inconspicuous places at all the drawers and containers, keeping the important documents in case someone sneaked a look at them. He also did not keep all of his money in one place. He was proud of his own cautiousness and believed that he would be rewarded one day for it. Like now. When Rick opened the roster of beggars, there was a hair on each page in the same position. This should have been a good thing. It would mean that nobody had flipped the pages. However, Rick was the son of a scribe. His father had taught him that if a person wants it done, it was possible for a good thief or ranger to avoid the hair trick. They can open up the documents they want with the utmost secrecy. And so, Rick learned a more cautious approach from his father. The way to read the pages in secret would obviously be to put the hair strands back in their original position after flipping the pages. The fastest way would be to hold the hair in place, turn the pages, then use the hand to hold the top and bottom layer of the page to keep the hair in place. How would one counter this method? For nobles, the fastest and safest would be to use a wax seal. However, Rick's father had a special method. They used fry oil to create a sticky gel. This oil was used by the poor living near the riverbank. One characteristic and also the weakness of this gel was that it was not very sticky. As long as the book was not too heavy, even if the book is closed after being coated, the glued area would not stick. An external force was needed to hold both sides for some time before the page would stick. When Rick opened the roster, he found the hair at the same place except for something different. The hair was stuck to the page. Someone had been reading his list of beggars. That person held this hair as that person flipped the pages. Rick felt his heart turn cold. On top of that, to have all four hairs at inconspicuous positions at their original positions without leaving any traces show that this person is a master. Fortunately, the secret technique that was passed down by my father enabled me to notice this. 4 days ago, after watching Thales' begging act, I looked through the roster to find out which house he lived in. At that time, everything was normal. From then until now. In these 4 days, somebody had come into my room and looked at the roster of beggars? Rick's scalp felt cold. He suddenly realized that this was not the most important thing. He frantically opened the secret compartment of the drawers and checked the most important document, the trafficking books and the passbook of his secret deposits at Princely Bank. His books and passbook were all safe. There were no signs of them being flipped and the hairs also fell naturally. Rick felt relieved. Fortunately, the things in the secret compartment are still, wait. If it was a master. How did he miss the secret compartment? He took out the entire secret compartment and took it apart. He then placed his hand on the top of one part of the secret compartment to look for the hair that was stuck there. After that, he collapsed back in his chair. The hair was still stuck to a seam of the secret compartment. When Rick was still scared out of his wits, he entered the dining hall. He turned a blind eye to the flirting Leork and Felicia. However, the always objectionable Leork loved gloating over others' misfortune. He shouted out to Rick. "Accountant. I heard you met a ghost." Rick ignored him and sat down but continued to look expressionless. He pulled over a bottle of ink used for bookkeeping and treated it as sauce as he poured it over his beefsteak. "Don't mind him." Felicia smiled as she sat in Leork's arms. She glanced amorously at the assassin with her lips pursed and fed red wine to him. "Do you still want to come to my room tonight?" "Of course." "Of course," Leork hurriedly replied without waiting to swallow the wine. "I just learned today that the boss had removed the sentries outside the rooms a week ago. So, tonight we can, we can be even wilder." "I-oh. You are really naughty." Clang. Rick's ink bottle fell and spilled ink onto the table. The ink flowed to the front of the couple. He had a pale expression as he raised his head to see the displeased Leork and Felicia. "A week ago, there were no sentries at the houses at the headquarters?" "Nonsense." Leork wiped away the ink smeared on his body. In a bad mood, he threw a bread at Rick's face. "Recently, there is a lot of activity at the Blood Bottle Gang. The boss said he wants to keep this confidential and the fewer people around the better. That is why the sentry posts were moved outside the house. They are not even allowed to go into the house to use the toilet. However, you do not have to worry. Don't you have an inseparable ghost protecting you?" Then, in that hallway. Rick did not realize that his voice started to tremble. There should be no sentries at that passageway? Leork and Felicia had already started kissing each other as though there was nobody else around. Rick took a deep breath. The day before yesterday, I was followed for some unknown reason at the abandoned houses. Then that night there was a non-existent sentry in the walkway. Lastly, someone looked at the beggar's roster in the room. Wonderful. Everything is starting to connect. Nair Rick then nervously told himself. You are being watched. Your opponent could be very powerful. Powerful enough to move freely in the heavily guarded headquarters in Blackstreet. Not even a terrible assassin like Leork or an experienced warrior like the boss, Morris, noticed. I was lucky to receive my late father's blessings and notice this. He could be right behind me. I must save myself. I need to find his motive. Rick's mind ran wildly. In the past 2 days, that guy must have already turned my room upside down. However, he had only had a good look at the beggar's roster. My more important account book was discarded as though it was a worn-out shoe. That guy is looking for something in the beggar's roster. That's right. When I was being followed, I was at the abandoned houses. Those were the beggar's residences. He is looking for a beggar. However, Rick had a headache thinking. He had more than 100 beggars under him. The next month, bears would send another group of children of unknown origins. The important and valuable children such as the descendants of some of the elites or children of the wealthy were either already ransomed or killed. Which beggar was the guy looking for? With such terrifying skill and strength, why did he not just demand openly from the Brotherhood? We would just give him to you. I would rather be in a harmonious relationship with him. I might as well drag out all the beggars and strip them naked to do a body search. Or maybe I would kill them all. This would be better than being scared out of his wits having a ghost hanging around. Wait. I just noticed something. Why did he not make a request to the Brotherhood? Naturally, this is because it is something nobody should know, even if it was the Blackstreet Brotherhood. Are they the Brotherhood's competitors? That is wrong. If the Blood Bottle Gang had such strength, the Blackstreet Brotherhood would have already been destroyed dozens of times. That means he does not have any formal channel and also felt that dealing with the Brotherhood of the Lower City District was not worth the time. Naturally, such terrifying people would not have any dealing with gangs from the slums. Why is he interested in these long-lost orphans? If he is looking for missing children, then why doesn't he just go directly to the police? Such people would be very influential. The authorities wouldn't dare to ignore him. Even the Brotherhood could only comply. Wait. Rick then seemingly noticed an important point. Powerful, sneaky, secretive, interested in the origins of a child and does not want to deal with the Brotherhood. Strength requires money and resources. He is secretive because it would be bad for him if this is made public. He does not deal with the Brotherhood because he is too highly ranked. As for being interested in the children that the Brotherhood had gathered from different sources and channels. Wait. Since his strength is probably above supreme class, he must be backed by power, wealth, and position. Yet he avoided the Brotherhood and the police to secretly search for a certain important child, a child? Rick fiercely slapped his thigh as he an idea. This guy is involved in the blood inheritance struggle of a big family. Fuck. Rick glared hard opposite him at Leork and Felicia who were starting to neck. However, his thoughts had long separated from this couple. Perhaps in the entire constellation, none of the 15 million people would know of this day. A secret truth that would shake the kingdom and the continent was almost discovered by an insignificant gang leader. Editor's note. Fry is the term for fish in the infant stage. You could think of them as baby fishes. Please don't confuse it with cooking oil used for frying. Chapter 4, Disaster Strikes Unexpectedly. Jayla. Bring another dozen glasses of black pine wine. Inside the noisy and dim Sunset pub, Quaid was breathing heavily as he leaned down on the bar counter. He raised a glass of wine to his mouth, drinking glass after glass. Hey, big guy. If you don't tip, there would be no black pine wine. Jayla stood behind the bar counter and was in a bad mood as she brought 2 glasses of black pine wine. She slammed them on the bar counter without a trace of politeness. I am giving you the last 2 glasses out of respect for your father. I will give you 30 seconds to finish drinking it. After that, quickly get lost. Every time you sit here for more than an hour, the profits of my bar, no, the entire underground street would drop by 10%. Quaid was already in a daze. Even in the din of the bar, Jayla's voice still sounded distant. The feeling of being stared at and the possible mockery in their hearts set Quaid's heart aflame. In those years, I was a terrifying presence in the lower district, the Blood Axe Quaid. If it was not because of that incident, now, why is it that a bar girl even dares to bully me? Even the bald-headed Sven who debuted 2 years later than I dared to ridicule me in front of the beggar children. They laughed at my lower body that. Fuck. Watch where you are going, girl. Quaid gnashed his teeth. He shook his heavy head as he stood and grabbed Jayla's hand. He pulled her across the bar counter and fiercely roared, I said, another dozen glasses of black pine wine. The whole pub turned quiet. The lower district was well known for its chaos in Eternal Star City. Moreover, the underground street was famous for its chaos in the lower district. This was especially so after the Blackstreet Brotherhood took over 10 years ago. This chaotic place revolved around the Sunset Pub. In the Sunset Pub, if a person was not a member of the Brotherhood, he would be here looking for the Brotherhood members. This was why when Quaid grabbed Jayla's hand, all the other people in the pub just watched the scene. They did not say anything nor did they try and stop it. Quaid felt more and more dizzy. However, he still felt that the wrist he seized felt slippery and soft. He could smell the fragrance of Jayla's body. In the dim light from the candles, the nearby Jayla's brown hair appeared tidy and clean. Her smooth face and delicate figure appeared clearer than usual, causing Quaid's imagination to run wild. Jayla was frightened. She was shocked by this once powerful thug who was now a drunkard. The noise from the guests had vanished, making the drunk Quaid feeling pleased. He felt that his actions had received the proper attention. But soon, when he looked at Jayla's body, he started to get sober. His recklessness to be pleased gradually turned into fear. Jayla Charlton. Quaid was one of the few who knew her full name. This pretty woman. Quite suddenly remembered that his father warned him to stay away from her many times. The captivating and daring bar girl was gazing fixedly at him. Quide's lower jaw began to tremble. Jayla, I did not. Before Quide could react, the hand that seized Jayla's wrist was, in turn, pulled and locked at the back. The next second, Quide's middle finger and forefinger were bent towards the wrong direction. What followed was a heart-wrenching severe pain. Arg! Quide shouted in pain. Even his face twisted in a grimace. However, it was not over. She had ruthlessly hooked his hand and then forcefully pulled his elbow joint the other way. Crack! Arg! No! Jayla! Big sister Jayla! I was wrong, I should not have, arg! Quide's scream coincided with the sound of his elbow being dislocated. Before Quide's cry for mercy had ended, the nimble woman had already taken advantage of the momentum to flip over. In her extremely short pants, she had already lifted her slender left leg over the bar counter and smashed it onto Quide's neck. Good job, little Jayla. You did not make the boss lose face. With this skill, you can apply for the Eradicator swordsmanship training. She is actually wearing safety pants. I swear I saw it. I dare to bet 10 coppers that she is wearing black. The surrounding guests resumed the partying spirit. All of them cheered for Jayla. Listen here, you big-headed gorilla. Jayla ruthlessly glared at Quide, who was gasping for breath. She stood with one foot behind the counter and her left feet on the countertop while her right arm locked Quide's extended arm. Jayla's figure was graceful and slender. She slowly pulled out a weird knife from the holster on her left leg. The blade and the handle of the knife were not in a straight line. From a distance, it looked like the leg of a wolf. After that, Jayla stabbed the palm of Quide's hand without batting an eyelid. The wolf limb blade nailed him to the bar. The cheers of the other guests became even louder. Woo woo! Quide's tears streamed down from the pain. However, with his neck being squeezed, his cries sounded like a pig's. Jayla slowly lowered her upper body. Her gentle beauty was evident. She approached Quide's teary face before whistling and laughing. With a look that was as fierce as a ruthless demon, but an amorous and rhythmic, causing others to feel disappointed, voice, she spoke. Quide Rhoda. I don't care whose son you are. I don't care that you are the head of the beggars. I don't care that you are a thug collecting debts. However, you better fucking listen up. From now onwards, if you dare to appear in my pub, I will mince your genitalia into minced meat, blend it into wine, and make you drink it. Do you understand me? Quide cried as he held his pierced right hand and ran out of the pub. Meanwhile, the other guests laughed loudly while Jayla continued to project a despicable look. Jayla clapped her hands before she wiped the wolf limb blade clean with a look of disgust as though it was not blood but the mucus of a devil. Jayla turned around unhappily and looked at the other guests who were still looking. Most of them had lascivious looks and ulterior motives. What are you looking at? Whoever dares to keep looking will be charged double. Her rude words caused the others' attention to go back to their wine. Jayla then ruthlessly threw away the rag and returned to the kitchen. Is that enough? I did as you said and even said the word genitalia. Jayla grabbed a bottle of white wine. A multi-purpose pocket knife appeared in her hand which she used to neatly open the cork. Of course, Miss Jayla. In the kitchen, Quide's deputy and the actual manager of the beggar's business, Mayor Rick, gently lifted his black hat and nodded with a smile. I hope he would restrain himself in future by not drinking too much and continue to wantonly tyrannize the beggars. The Brotherhood cannot always clean up his mess. I am sure you mean that you cannot always clean up his mess. Jayla quickly drank a mouthful of wine. Rick suddenly felt that Jayla's rough actions appeared appropriate, fresh, and attractive. That is also correct. This is because the Brotherhood's gains are my gains. Rick laughed and subconsciously touched his neck. Do you think this would be effective? I feel like such a person would end up causing more problems such as venting on your beggars. You know him well, Rick thought to himself. Actually, I myself am not too sure if it would be useful. This is because I do not know him that well. However, Rick shook his head helplessly. This was his signature expression of innocence. He was aggravated 3 days ago for a laughable reason. He beat up one of the young ones with good prospects. If the child was not clever, another good prospect would have been killed by Quide. I never knew you were so kind and righteous, Jayla sarcastically said in her heart. At this point, Rick's eyes became firm. That is why I decided that this cannot continue. He has to be admonished, otherwise sooner or later he would destroy the business containing all my hardships. All right. You do not have to explain to me the reasons you want to kill your boss. I never said I wanted to kill him. Returning to the main topic, give me my agreed remuneration. I only take cash, Jayla interrupted Rick. She lazily drank the white wine. She then stretched out her tongue and tried to lick the last drop of wine from the bottle. It was an action that stirred Rick's mind. Also, you must pay the money he owed today. Especially. Jayla narrowed her eyes at Rick, who had taken off his hat and saluted and left. Don't think I do not know that you substituted Quide's wine. Others may not notice, but I, Jayla, from the Sunset Pub can tell that Quide drank the powerful and highly concentrated Chaka wine. Unlike the other wine, Chaka is often given to the death convicts in handcuffs in the western battlefield for that last charge. Drunk people have no trouble moving, but they are just not as aware. That is why, Rick, did you think you have too much money or did you really want him dead? Quide was still tipsy and in utter humiliation and pain when he returned to the entrance of the abandoned houses. He did not stay at the Blackstreet headquarters where Quide felt that everybody who knew the news would be looking at his lower body. Sure enough, two thugs happened to pass by behind the walls. The contents of their chat drifted from afar. Have you heard? The beggars were passing rumors that Quide is no longer a man. What does that mean? How could he become a woman? Idiot. It means that Quide got castrated. I heard that a few years ago, he collected debts at a haunted house at Karima Street. It was where Earl Norfolk and his family were hanged. Apparently, he encountered a red-clothed female ghost that cut off his lower body part, a clean cut. Suddenly, Quide felt as though all the blood in his body rose to his head. The next moment, he lost control of himself and roared as he rushed out from behind the wall. He then strangled the throat of one of the thugs tightly. Who? Who said that? Which bastard? Which bastard? I am going to kill him. The other thug stumbled back from fright. Quide overpowered the thug on the ground. His grip gradually tightened. However, his impaled palm was unable to apply much strength. Back in the day, Quide was a well-known head of the thugs in the Brotherhood and also a leader. He was dispirited in the past few years and this caused his stamina and skill to drop. As long as it was not the woman from the Charlton family, he would still be able to overcome the other common thugs, especially in this given scenario. At that moment, Quide's anger had become a source of endless strength. Boss Quide. These are only rumors. We do not believe, Arg. Quide suddenly raised his head like a beast. The thug offering an excuse stepped back in extreme fear. He could immediately see that his companion had turned pale. The companion's breath became weaker and weaker. The thug that kept retreating saw the ominous glint from Quide's face and became frightened. Ah, that's right. These rumors all came from the beggars. Boss, it is not our fault. Go and ask the beggars. Crack. It was the sound of a neck being broken. The thug that was being strangled by Quide was now lifeless. Quide slowly got up from the ground with an ominous glint in his eyes. The strong aftereffects of the wine he drank had caused him to gradually lose his reasoning. The remaining thug trembled as he looked at the terrible situation. He cried out in distress as he frantically tried to escape. Quide wanted to chase but he was so drunk and unsteady that he was unable to run. Quide ruthlessly gasped for breath as he looked at the corpse by his feet. He was still not satisfied so he kicked the corpse a few times. Then he shook his head and walked towards the dozen abandoned houses. Quide never wondered why the thugs on patrol never showed up as it was necessary to keep a tight watch over the beggars. His only drive was to find the ones that ridiculed him and then torture them to death one by one. As he had just killed someone, Quide felt as though a shackle in his mind had been released after a long time. He had returned to the days in the past where he made a living with the knife. These damned thieves, he fiercely thought to himself. Since you dare to start such rumors, you better be ready to pay the price. Damned thieves. The fleeing thug scaled the large gate of the abandoned houses. He coincidentally met Rick at the tree outside the gate. Mr. Rick. The thug looked at Rick as though he had found his savior. Boss Quide has gone mad. Didn't you say that we would be able to escape in time? In the end, before we could finish speaking, Quide. The thug was so terrified that he was breathless and his words were not clear. Pearson could not escape? He was killed? Rick was taken aback. After the thug sobbed and confirmed it, Rick shook his head sadly. This is my fault. I had thought that after hearing this news, Quide would have no other choice. Go and close the large gate. Lock Quide inside the abandoned houses district. After that, prepare the carriage. We are leaving immediately. All right, Mr. Rick. Where are we going? The badly shaken thug quickly nodded repeatedly when he heard that they would leave. He did not stop to think about what would happen to the beggars who would also be locked in. Go to our headquarters. Look for Boss Morris. Rick watched the thug run to the stone gates. He closed the gates and then locked it. After that, Rick's expression looked solemn. This time, Quide would look for all the beggars. Amongst them is definitely the one that the ghost is looking for. I had moved the schedule ahead today. It is not dark yet. Quide would have most of the night to deal with the beggars. Whether they would be killed or tyrannized, these would be the problems of the ghost or assassin. Since he is interested in the beggars, what would he do when the beggars suffer a catastrophe? First of all, he would have no time to look for me. If he is here to look for the beggars, Quide would be killed by him. The Brotherhood would then take over this place tomorrow and I would not have any more problems. If he is here to kill a certain beggar, he may see Quide, this is very likely and Noble should never be underestimated, and allow him to continue killing the beggar. Once the objective is achieved, the problem would also be solved. In other words, the family problem of this big shot and my cold neck would be solved tonight. If it doesn't, the ghost that is unable to find its objective would look for me, muttered Rick. Rick did not think that the lackeys of a big family would have a good temper. He also did not believe that he would live to see the next day after meeting them. Rick had also thought of feigning illness for a month or even transferring to some other place. He had wanted to run as far as possible, away from this place, until the ghost found what it wanted. However, if he were to suddenly fall sick, it may reveal to the ghost that he knew of the ghost's existence. That would be using his life as stakes to gamble on the ghost's compassion. Rick believed that there would be a safer method, a scapegoat to reduce suspicion, to expose the ghost and end his bad luck. Boss cried. This time I will have to trouble you. Rick thought. It is unfortunate for the beggars such as Thales and Karak. It's certainly possible that certain troubles might have occurred because of my inadequate supervision. But when compared to my life and future. At this moment, the lucky thug who escaped returned quickly from a distance with a carriage. Rick nodded to him and gave him a comforting and encouraging smile. He then went to the carriage and pulled out a mini crossbow that had its arrows soaked in blue vine grass. He proceeded to shoot it into the wide-open mouth of the surprised thug. What Rick did would never be known to the world. However, his actions would influence the fate of the kingdom. Because their rest period had been shifted earlier, the beggars of the sixth house led by Thales sat next to the fire they had lighted with difficulty as they counted that day's earnings. The black-clothed woman gave us 8 coppers. I heard that her youngest son had just died from typhoid. No wonder she was so generous. Droopy Ears Mirella gave us all her remaining coppers after grocery shopping. Oh, there were only 2. Sinti smiled and counted the coppers one by one, placing them in his left hand. Thales nodded and grabbed a sharp rock. He then wrote 2 characters on the ground. That thin man wearing high boots would not give us any money. So, Ryan and I taught him a lesson. Kellett took out a card, looked at it worriedly and said, however, he only had this card in his hand. I do not know what this is for. This is the pass for the state-run research association, Jade Star Grand Library. That is in the upper district 5 blocks away from us, Thales said after he scrutinized the card. That thin man must be a foreign scholar. He is probably a philosopher or a scientist. However, with his unconventional appearance, he is most likely a literature and art scholar. Wow, Thales. You can read those words. Both Coria and Ned looked at Thales in admiration. How is that possible? Thales shrugged as he noticed the admiration of the 2 children. Nobody taught us how to read or count. I simply looked at the back of the card and saw that book emblem. However, Thales had already taught himself how to read a little. Some of the words he learned were Sunset Pub, Grove Pharmacy, and National Research Institute. These words on the signboards and his previous memories made him value knowledge. He would not pass up any opportunity to gather knowledge. The freedom to sit at desks and learn from their predecessors was really a blessing. Thales lifted his dust-covered palms that had worked the whole day which were covered prematurely with calluses, then rubbed his stomach that was eternally hungry inside. Thales could not remember his transmigration circumstances. To be precise, he only regained the memories of his past life after the gradual maturity of the young Thales cerebrum. His memory of when he was 2 to 3 years old was unclear, just like a regular 2-year-old. He only remembered sticky red blood. He did not know why color could be described with the word sticky, a black stone room full of crying infants, a skinny woman who he would later on recognize as the black-hearted widow Bears, the female leader responsible for raising the new children of the Brotherhood. Thales was sent to the abandoned houses at the age of 3. It was also about that time when memories of his past life began to surface. Most of the scenes he recalled were of himself sitting in front of a desk looking back and forth between a book and a computer or sitting in a classroom conversing with a dozen or so young people that were dressed differently or together with a middle-aged professor discussing something. However, that was now an illusion. In the past 4 years, Thales managed to maintain the living conditions of the beggars in the 6th house. This was in an environment of crime and death where beggars were beaten up and bullied in the lower district. Compared to his past life as a postgraduate student where he was more brain than brawn, Thales had acquired many new skills in his 4 years of his begging career. For example, putting on an act to win sympathy, pickpocketing, eavesdropping silently and collaborating with someone else to shift the blame. In the meantime, Thales had made many preparations that exceeded the capabilities of a beggar. For example, creating good relationships with people from the different social strata. In the lower district presumably they were from the lower strata, secretly exploring the secrets of the Brotherhood, arranging secret locations and stashing some stuff from the bosses. Quide was not wrong at all. That was right. Thales was not ready to accept the destiny given to him by the world. He will not become a contented beggar, nor did he want to become a thug of the Brotherhood, a thief, or involved in any kind of gang-related roles in Eternal Star City. He wanted to run away, find his own life and become a free man. At the very least, more freedom than his current life. I just need to proceed step by step with a good plan. Thales looked to a corner of the house where there was an inconspicuous slab stone. Then I can. At this moment, screams of fear and panic came from the 17th house. No! Kara! Soon, Thales would learn the most important lesson after he transmigrated. Disaster strikes unexpectedly. Chapter 5, Mad Quide. The abandoned houses were not houses but the name of a location in Eternal Star City. It was located in the lower city 2nd district, adjacent to the infamous Black Street. The entire area was also about the size of one street. Thales once heard the elders of the Brotherhood mention that these abandoned houses were once the King of Constellation's courtyard. 100 years ago, the buildings had a better name, but nobody remembered it. Only the city hall had records of it. It was once bustling and filled with ordinary city folk of the kingdom's capital. At some point in time, it had turned into the meeting grounds of gangs and, occasionally, the battlegrounds of different factions. As a result, the lively neighborhood was gradually stained with blood and steel. The place became abandoned with only tattered brick buildings remaining. The abandoned houses were also treated as deadlands for discarding dead bodies, and so, to this day, children that grew up happily in the capital would be admonished with, "If you are disobedient, I will send you to the abandoned houses." From then on, the notoriety of the abandoned houses was second only to the terrifying Blackstreet. When the Blackstreet Brotherhood rose and seized control of supremacy in the underground world at the lower city district, they turned the abandoned houses into the headquarters of the beggars' business. In order to manage the beggars and prevent them from running away at night, they arranged thugs to watch every house. The Brotherhood dug trenches, 10 feet wide and 15 feet in depth, around the houses. They then filled the trenches with wood and rusted nails. The only entrance would be the front gate, which could be locked up. There were rumors that many people died trying to get out, but one person eventually managed to find a way to escape. However, in the 4 years Thales had been at the abandoned houses, nobody managed to find this legendary secret tunnel. Instead, the bodies in the trenches increased every year as the Brotherhood's business expanded. It was said that every year, there were children who did not know better and attempted to escape. This was also why the Brotherhood cleaned up the trenches of corpses once a year. As its name suggests, the brick houses there were abandoned, and there were a total of 23 houses. There would have been more, but some had collapsed from the gang wars many years ago. There were also some that were demolished to dig trenches. These houses were irregularly placed behind the gates. Some were close to each other while others were isolated. Beggars with good luck would be assigned to houses with wells. The unlucky ones, like Thales from the 6th house, would have to draw water from other houses to fill up their water jars. It was something priceless. Water and food often caused the beggars to fight. One example was the water jar from the 6th house. In his second year there, Thales had used various methods to reach an agreement with the 17th house next door to obtain water once a week. Before that, Ned and Coria have not arrived yet, and there was only Cinti, Ryan, Kellett, and 2 other beggars who were already dead. At that time, even drinking water was a problem. Right now, Thales heard the leader of the 17th house, Diego's voice. Thales could still remember Diego's voice from the time that they had fought for water when he used a stone to smash Diego's head. It sounded very much like this one. "Kara. Someone. We did not. It wasn't us." Diego's voice sounded agonized and panicky. As a result, all the beggars in the 6th house, including Thales, were unable to react for a moment. But Thales had memories that did not belong to this world. His first reaction was to take the others into the yard to hide in the hole behind the house. After some time, Thales felt that it was too late to regret his decision. He glanced at the stone hidden under the wall of the 17th house. He stared at the dog tunnel that connected the 17th with the 6th house. This was the symbol of alliance between the children during those days. What happened to Diego? Did he get into a fight? Ned asked curiously after hiding himself. The child beggars did not exactly get along. Among the poor houses, the 6th house was an exception to this rule. Many of the children's injuries can lead to death. Aside from Quide, their injuries were usually caused by other child beggars. Children below the age of 10 do not know their own strength. One of Thales' housemates had also died like this before Ned and Coria arrived. However, the 17th house was also one of the minorities. Diego was a brown-skinned, narrow-eyed blonde. He was a carefree and stubborn child. At 9.5 years old, he had more leadership qualities compared to Cinti and Thales. At the very least, the beggars of the 17th house listened to him. This also made the battle for water between the 17th and 6th houses full of twists. It doesn't seem like a fight. Are the other houses bullying Diego? It's surely the 10th house's Karak. He loves bullying others. Kellett seemed to have thought of something and spoke hurriedly. Then we must hurry and go help. We told them we would help each other. Ryan was about to climb out of the hole and climb into the dog tunnel when he was pulled back by Thales. Don't be impatient. It's not Karak. It's something else. Thales listened solemnly to the horrible screams next door. No. Diego. After that, there was a blunt sound as though a sandbag was thrown to the wall. However, the voice this time came from a child named Ursula. Thales remembered this 8-year-old child. That time when the fight for water was over, Ursula had pouted tightly as she unwaveringly stood by Diego's side. During the fight, it was she who held onto Cindy's thigh and prevented him from intruding onto Diego's and Thales' fight. Had Thales not violently attacked Diego's knee and quickly picked up a stone, they might not have had water to drink today. Something is wrong. As the oldest child in the house, Cindy's expression began to turn somber. The 6th house member was the happiest and most willing to work together with Thales. Cindy rarely spoke, but when he does, it is either an important matter or a critical point. Soon, the children's uncertainty turned into panic. Beg for mercy. Beg for mercy. Go on. I love to hear you kids beg. A vigorous and frenzied voice came from next door. Every beggar in the abandoned houses would never forget this voice. It was more terrifying than the devils of hell. At the very least, a devil would not break a child beggar's bones inch by inch, or slash open their faces one slice after another. A devil would also not submerge a child beggar's face underwater and say that he was quenching your thirst at the same time. At least, the child beggars did not know whether a devil would actually do it. It was Quide. Quide Rhoda, the leader of the beggars in the Blackstreet Brotherhood, was both their nightmare and doomsday star. No. Boss Quide. We are wrong. We, Arg. Let us see if you still dare to speak nonsense. Let us see if you still dare to curse me behind my back. Damn red-haired woman. Damn Baldy. Damn Jayla Charlton. All of you should die. While quite cursed deliriously, the sounds of beatings and the sounds of fists, rocks, or bodies colliding against the wall was heard. Help! Help! Diego! Kara! Marita! Hurry and get up! Hurry and come save me! Run! Run quickly, Arg! Oh my god! Where are the guards? Where is Mr. Rick? Gods! He wants to kill us all! No! Don't! Under the moonlight at the abandoned houses, heart-wrenching cries came from many mouths. Thales was shaken to the core. Thales took 3 seconds to react. What was Quai doing? He turned around and looked at the others in the 6th house. Ned and Coria were trembling by the hole. Ryan, who had wanted to rush out, was already petrified. Kellet and Cinti were not much better. The former's expression of impatience and fear rolled back and forth as he watched them. He wanted to speak but could not. The latter turned pale and stared back at Thales. Bang! 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 All of you damn trash. Even you guys dare to ridicule me. You dare to ridicule Blood Axe Quai Rhoda. Even you guys dare, huh? Scream. Why are you guys not screaming? Scream. The frenzied roars were accompanied by agonizing screams. Everyone did not want to think too deeply about the broken voices. Thales knew that at this moment, panic has spread in the 6th house. He quickly thought of the current situation. Quai is beating up the beggars in the 17th house. No, just by listening to him, and the intensity of his beatings, tonight's attack is not something as simple as venting. Besides that, Quai may be an asshole, but he wouldn't attack everyone in the house at the same time. What about Rick? What about the guards and patrolling thugs? They may not be able to hear from across the stone walls, but the thugs patrolling on the road should be able to hear it. Naturally, Thales did not know that the forces guarding the place had been reduced to 2 for the night. On top of that, these 2 thugs would never return. Thales. What do we do? Kellet instinctively felt that something was wrong from listening to the tragic events next door. He was pale and sweating as he continued to ask Thales. Quiet. Everyone is not allowed to go out. Thales frowned and struggled to think of a countermeasure. Before he could finish, a child beggar's figure appeared at the dog tunnel connecting the 17th and the 6th houses. Coria cried out quietly in fear. Thales recognized who it was from a quick glance. Coming from the 17th house was Ursula, whose head was bleeding and about to collapse. Before Thales could help her up, Ursula fell down, gasping for breath and totally oblivious of her blood-drenched face and hair. Run! Run quickly! We must quickly! Thales and Cinti nervously helped her up. The tragic screams still continued, but Ursula seemed to have lost her sanity. She could no longer answer questions except to simply murmur "run quickly" over and over again. Until Thales slapped her in the face. What is going on? Did Quai come out? Ursula's tears kept streaming down. Quai has gone mad. He wants, not just us. He intends to look for us in each house one by one. Ursula was already incoherent with her words, but it was enough for the children of the 6th house to understand what was going on. All of them turned pale. Even Thales could not help but feel fear in his heart. When he sees someone, he hits and beats them until they stop breathing. I heard crying and went to the 3rd house to take a look. I saw him drag Larry out. There was so much blood when he walked out. He then saw me. He caught Kara. Kara was smashed into the ground. Diego wanted to stop him but took a few hundred hits. Diego became motionless. Then there was Marita. Quai threw her into the bonfire. Sniffs, bonfire. Thales could feel his scalp go numb. Thales had seen Quai beat people up before, but he would usually be stopped by the other thugs when the child was on the verge of death. The Brotherhood did not care if the abused child received permanent injuries. The 3rd house is finished. Our house is, too. He was beating up Midilon just now. I don't know how many houses are left. The weeping and lamenting Ursula had not yet finished speaking, but Thales suddenly covered her mouth. At this moment, through Thales' actions, everyone realized that the crying and the roaring from next door had stopped. The 17th house was quiet as though the children were asleep. Only ragged panting could be heard. Nobody knew what it meant. In the 6th house, all the children began to tremble. In that instant, Thales quickly turned and lowered his voice as much as he could. Listen. We must quickly. Bang. A loud noise was suddenly heard. The doors to the 6th house were opened. From the entrance, Quai's shaky figure slowly approached. He looked at the 7 trembling children with a fierce and hideous grin. Where can you run? You look familiar. Everyone in the 6th house, including Thales, were stunned. Quai rubbed his nose. Thales saw a bright red color on his face, the color of a drunk person. Quai's hands were dark red, the color of blood. Quai looked at Thales, who was covering Ursula's mouth. I remember you. His expression shifted constantly between a sinister leer to rage and resentment. Ah, you're that kid that was caught by that damn Baldy. It's you. You must be the one ridiculing me and running your mouth behind my back. Am I right? It must be you, it must be you. Thales' heart felt ice cold. Rick cautiously drove the carriage while he forced himself to calm down. All the while, he felt the temperature behind his neck. Fortunately, everything was normal and the ghost did not appear. It would probably be a headache for Quide. At that time, he approached the headquarters of the Blackstreet Brotherhood. Rick breathed a sigh of relief. Accountant! Came Leork's voice. The assassin from the Brotherhood shouted about 20 feet away from Rick. Leork's face appeared from a distance as if it was under the torchlight. He seemed dissatisfied and asked, "Why did you come here at this time? This here is dangerous business. Even you with your account balancing hands are thinking of joining the fun?" Rick froze for a moment. As the carriage continued moving, he saw that the small public square in front of the headquarters was covered with torches. All of them were standing quietly. All of them wore black cloth around them. The ones wearing these black clothes were members of the Brotherhood, and there were at least a few hundred people. Rick suddenly realized that almost all of the Brotherhood's manpower were here. Rick quickly got down from the carriage. He hastily walked a few steps. Under the moonlight, he saw his superior, the Fat Morris, who was also the big shot in the trafficking business. He was discussing something with a few figures with strange silhouettes. A 2 meters tall, blonde giant, a mysterious figure in dark red robes, and a fat, simple-looking man. Rick was shocked. He recognized them. These were big shots from other places in the Brotherhood. There were even a few bosses that would normally not stay in Eternal Star City. Rick moved through the fully equipped fighters that were armed with a variety of weapons from axes to knives, to blades, or spiked maces as they sorted their equipment and walked straight to Leork. "Leork, it is great to see, never mind. I won't speak of nonsense. What's going on tonight?" Rick and Leork did not like each other. They met often simply because of their jobs, and they have a tacit understanding and agreement with each other. However, the one who knew most about the situation and also the quickest person to ask would be Leork. "The boss didn't tell you?" Leork pursed his mouth in disdain and threw him a glance. As usual, confrontation with the Blood Bottle Gang. "Besides the mystic gun and the infantry bows, we can use every other weapon." The famously efficient and ruthless assassin ran his hand over the scimitar behind his waist, as though feeling the sharpness of the blade. Rick was startled. Confronting the Blood Bottle Gang. The assassin took a deep breath. He then laughed and licked his lips. "Tonight, we will capture the Red Street Market." "Still no news from Yodel? What about the Sunset Temple?" The middle-aged noble with gray hair was in front of a fireplace, facing a luxurious chair, and asked somberly, "Patience, my friend. We have waited for 12 years, it does not matter if we were to wait a little longer." The robust figure rose from the chair and grabbed the handle of a scepter that was inlaid with light blue crystals. Looking closely, the crystals of the scepter seemed to twinkle in a slow and steady rhythm. "Our pointless conjectures here only cast doubt on Yodel's ability. Furthermore, is he not carrying the flame of the lamp? I believe he is close to the target and simply needs to make a final confirmation." The robust figure said slowly. The middle-aged noble gave a deep bow. "I do not doubt Yodel's ability, nor have I ever underrated his loyalty. It is just..." The man paused and sighed. "He is too calm and callous. Other than his unwavering loyalty, he is not interested in anything else. Just like 12 years ago. I am worried that he..." The middle-aged man did not continue. The robust figure also did not immediately reply. The robust figure carried the scepter and went to the floor-to-ceiling window. He looked out the windows at the resplendent lights of the great shrine in the distance. Even the moonlight could not compete with the brightness of that shrine. "Then prepare yourself and secretly proceed to the temple. Begin the moment there is news. There is no need to wait for Yodel's signal." After a while, the robust figure slowly added, "I have no reason to doubt Yodel. When he needs to act, he will not hesitate. However, it is good to have more than one hand prepared." The next chapter is added here because the chapter was missing from the upload platform, the first drop of blood. By the time Thales recovered, Quide had grabbed him by the neck and lifted him up. Thales struggled as he held on to the hand strangling his neck. However, he could not seem to gather his strength. He tried desperately to open his mouth but could not breathe. His 2 legs kept kicking as he began to feel faint. The hubbub around him sounded muffled, as though they were blocked by a thick cloth. Coria was crying, Ryan had curled himself up at the hole and trembled continuously, Kellett was sitting in front of the wall, terrified and whimpering. Cinti and Ned screamed as they boldly rushed forward fearlessly. One held onto Quide's thigh, the other struck Quide's belly with his small arms. Cinti was blown away and crashed into the water jar, spilling water all over the yard. Ned was ruthlessly struck by Quide. He screamed as he fell onto the ground, unable to get up. Thales did not have the time or the mood to be surprised at Ned's courage, or Kellett's and Ryan's cowardice. He was quite certain of Cinti's actions. Thales firmly used his fingernails to dig into Quide's hand that held his neck. He wanted to break free so that he could breathe. Suddenly, Thales' nails sank into the back of Quide's right hand, digging into a hollow wound. Thales' face had already turned red by then, so he did not hesitate and desperately dug into the wound. "Arg!" Quide screamed from the pain. His loosened his iron grip and then threw Thales towards a wall. Thales felt dizzy and his throat felt sore. He leaned against the wall as he coughed uncontrollably. Quide clutched his palm. On top of it was the wound made by Jayla, which had started bleeding again. "Damn Jayla Charlton! Damned brat!" Quide endured the pain as he roared furiously and drunkenly. Crack! The ferocious Quide suddenly turned around and saw only the child from the 17th house, Ursula, frantically trying to escape through the door. The door that had just collapsed earlier from Quide's trampling could not support her weight and had cracked open. Ha ha. Are you trying to run? Quiet grinned hideously and strode forward. He then grabbed Ursula's left leg. No. Don't. Ursula cried out as Quiet lifted her up by her leg. Brat. Have you struck iron before? No. Ha ha. Don't worry, I'll teach you. Thales climbed up in pain and was only in time to see Quiet swing Ursula's left leg with both arms and smashed her head against the wall behind him. Thales had just enough time to reflexively move out of the way. The crown of the head made a compressed sound. It was the same sound as when he once saw the fruit cellar smash open in Ellen Melon. That's right. We stole the luminous moon statue from that very person. Coria's wail turned into a shrill scream. Thales was stunned and could not close his eyes in time. Red and white liquid splashed onto his face. It was warm, yet cold. Ned had witnessed everything when he crawled up from the ground. He screamed as he collapsed. He then headed towards the dog tunnel leading towards the 17th house. Quiet opened his mouth and inhaled, looking intoxicated. It was as though he did not inhale air but black pine wine of the highest grade. This demon in human skin turned around and dropped whatever was left of Ursula. He then looked at Ned with a vigorous smile. At that moment, Thales thought for a moment that Ned was small and nimble, and that Ned would be able to dig into the dog tunnel before Quiet could reach him. Dig into that hole and everything will be fine. Dig and you will be safe. Dig in. However, before Ned could dig halfway in, Quiet grabbed Ned's legs. Are you the brat that had no money to give? Then what good are you? Ned screamed as he was dragged out of the hole by Quiet. Scream. Your screams are not wretched enough. It is a pity that the water jar is broken. We cannot play fishing anymore. Quiet shook his head to dispel the dizziness caused by the alcohol. He gazed at Cinti who had just got up from the ground and the water jar beside him. That makes things easy. Ned wailed and kicked. Quiet grabbed his face and slammed him onto the ground. He then lifted the 6-year-old's right foot and ruthlessly stepped onto the center of the 6-year-old beggar's back. Don't! Boom! Crack! A heart-stopping crack resounded at the same time as Thales' heart-wrenching cry. Everything in front of Thales blurred. Boom! Quiet stepped a second time. A third time. Crying out loud with the greatest effort ever, Cinti grabbed a fragmented piece of the water jar and charged towards Quiet. Quiet simply laughed and kicked away the fragment in Cinti's hand. He then grabbed Cinti's hemp collar and lifted him up. Looks like I can't do anything. Thales lowered his head. By the wall, Ursula's body was still quietly twitching. Ned was sprawled face down on the ground, motionless. I thought I was protecting them but I'm unable to do anything. I couldn't do anything. Cinti roared as he kicked. Quiet's high-pitched laughter became even more aggravated. Brat! Scream! Keep screaming! I love to hear you all scream. Maybe my mood will improve and I would let all of you go. Thales' eyes turned dim as he recalled a familiar scene. Deviant behavior. This is what we define human behavior that opposes social norms. An average person is more accustomed to calling it crime. However, we must know that crimes are only one small part of deviation. What we are concerned about is not the act but the meaning at a social level and its comprehension. Durkheim was one of the earliest scholars to start sociology. He also looked at deviation from the functionalist angle. One viewpoint is that the enforcement and punishment of deviant acts is one of the ways the authority shapes and models the basic structure of society. This was a fragment of the memories from Thales' past life. He had recovered some of it just a moment ago. Demon! You demon! Just then, Cinti's roar and kicks dispersed Thales' vision. Yes. I am a devil. Quiet laughed. Tell me, how would a devil cook you? Thales took a deep breath. Damned bastard. His mind was as clear as ever. He knew what to do. He knew what he should do. Thales clenched his teeth, turned around and rushed to a corner of the house. There, he grabbed a stone, lifted it up, and stretched his hand into the hole hidden underneath. Quick! Quickly find it. All right. Since you have guts, I'll leave you for last. Quiet laughed until his lips went crooked. He fiercely pulled Cinti's right leg until Cinti's face turned pale and then, crack. It was dislocated. Quiet dropped Cinti and proceeded to stomp on his dislocated leg. Cinti tried to endure the pain but he still ended up howling tragically. Thales heard the screams, driving him to search faster. Quiet then left the yard and walked towards the inner part of the house. The bright moonlight shined through the half-collapsed roof and onto Quiet's smile. Ryan folded his arms. He stared at the floor as he tried to shrink deeper into the wall with his body. Kellett trembled as he crawled out of the hole, wanting to pull Coria, who had turned silent from the hoarseness of her voice, to run away together with him. However, Coria was seemingly paralyzed from fear. She sobbed and would not move. Kellett did not dare look over at Cinti, but just pulled Coria as though he was begging. But Coria suddenly raised her head and then cried sorrowfully like a lamb. Kellett seemed to realize something and turned around, to see Quiet's smiling face. He peed in his pants. We're caught. Thales found the thing he wanted and then forcefully yanked it out. After that his right arm was grabbed by the mad, delighted Quiet from behind. Did you think I would leave you out, brat? I know that you are the most cunning and most treacherous amongst all you bastards. Ha ha. Quite gradually tightened his grip as he smiled proudly. No. Thales felt a tightening pain in his right arm. He struggled to turn around and attack Quide with what he found in his left hand. Look at that! Quide said as though he had found a treasure. He turned and avoided Thales' strike. Then he grabbed the thing from the child's left hand. It's a dagger. Ha ha. Brat. You actually thought of attacking me with a dagger? Ha ha ha. What were you going to do? Stab my thigh? Quide pulled Thales up and laughed wildly. Don't. Don't. Thales thought desperately. The dagger. He had stolen the sheathless dagger at the Sunset Pub. It was his last hope. Yo! Quide was surprised when he looked behind Thales. He saw a coin that had been uncovered when Thales yanked the dagger out of the hole. Look at what I've found. Is that a silver coin? It's a silver coin. Ha ha ha. You really are a damned brat. You stashed a silver coin away. Thales wanted to struggle with his left hand, but the strength of a 7-year-old was inadequate. He could only attack futilely at Quide's abdomen, which was as sturdy as an iron sheet. That silver coin was a gift from a noble woman at the Red Street Market. Thales did not lie. The goose-down-clothed noble woman had given him 12 coppers, but there was also 1 silver. Thales began to lose hope. Everything ends here. I have failed. For the price of lying. Quide ignored Thales' perfunctory punching and kicking. He simply grinned and picked up the silver coin with the dagger. He threw the silver into the air and then caught it again with the other side of the dagger. Even today, the kingdom's Mindy's silver was still valuable and rare. Engraved on its front was King Mindy's III. This was a historical figure in constellation and was well known throughout the continent. There was also a motto inscribed in an ancient font. A king does not gain respect by virtue of his bloodline. The bloodline's glory rests on the deeds of the king. Thales could not understand these words at all. Thales had bravely asked the noble woman for its true meaning and got an answer. Ah. Thales silently thought. I also wanted to learn words and study. I wanted to learn the knowledge and wisdom of this world. The result? Quide held the silver coin with the dagger. He waved the knife around in the air and seemed very satisfied with his skills. Seems like I have not regressed. He then pulled Thales out to the yard and threw the silver coin into the bonfire near the yard. For the price of lying, I shall reward you with this silver coin. Thales looked at the silver coin that was gradually turning black in the fire. He suddenly realized what Quide was going to do and kicked even more wildly. It was at this moment when Thales saw from the corner of his eyes, the crippled Ryan, who had always been timid, approached Quide from behind and raised a stone in his hand. Don't do it. Thales thought sadly. Ryan had never fought before. That stone is too small. Duh. Ryan's strength was insufficient. The stone struck the back of Quide's neck, but it was enough to attract Quide's attention. Run. Ryan. Run quickly. Thales, and Sinti, who was holding his right leg in agony, shouted loudly. Unfortunately, Ryan was a cripple. When he went begging one time, his leg was broken by a bad-tempered thief. After some time, he became crippled due to the lack of medical attention. Ryan retreated in panic, turning around as he limped hurriedly. Quide dragged Thales along as he turned around and chased Ryan. Quide quickly caught up with him. He was so angry that he laughed. Cripple. Quide opened his mouth and panted like a wild boar. That hit earlier was really great. Thump. Ryan was kicked to the ground. His eyes were full of fear and regret. I. Without waiting for the frightened Ryan to finish, Quide took the dagger and plunged it into Ryan's right wrist. Arg. Ryan's blood-curdling scream was deafening that even Thales trembled. Aren't you a cripple? Don't you already have one leg broken? Quide yelled in a frenzy. In that case, you must be more balanced top and bottom. After that, Quide pulled out the dagger. The smiling expression on his face became more intense. With one hand, he pushed Thales to the ground and then concentrated on Ryan. Thales saw Quide knee Ryan in the stomach. Quide then raised the dagger that had been used to stab the wrist and started cutting that hand as though he was sawing wood. Thales closed his eyes painfully. No. No. Arg. Arg. Don't. Arg. Ryan's tragic screams had turned into a continuous howl. Sinti bellowed angrily from the side. Thales glanced at the still weeping Coria or the quiet Kelet. Please, let this all come to an end. Just let it end. When Ryan's uninterrupted wails turned into painful sobs, the numbed Thales found himself lifted up by the collar again by Quide. He felt something hot near him. Thales opened his eyes and saw the handle of the dagger in front of him. On top of it was the silver coin. The boiling hot silver coin that was burnt until it was black. Its scorching heat seemed to assault his face. Open your mouth. Quide said with ruthless indifference. Nearby, Ryan held his bloody right hand. His eyes no longer showed any emotion. He simply lay down on his side and trembled from time to time. Only a little bit of skin was left of his palm at the right wrist. Thales coldly glared back at Quide. Are you not willing? Quide shook his head and laughed. Your eyes would work too. After that, Quide grabbed the dagger and moved the blackened coin that was on the dagger towards Thales' eyes. The blackened face of King Mindes slowly approached his eyes. The inscription on it also became clearer. A king does not gain respect by virtue of his bloodline. The bloodline's glory rests on the deeds of the king. In that instant that the coin was about to be stuck into Thales' eyes. Arg! Thales roared loudly. He struggled violently and suddenly bit into Quide's little finger at the handle of the dagger. Quide cried out hoarsely in pain. His body leaned back and the coin fell from the dagger, towards Thales' bare chest. A burning heat struck him. Arg, no! The severe burning sensation brought sharp pain. Thales could no longer bear the pain. He then opened his mouth to let go of Quide, then reached for the silver coin. Bstrd. Quide looked at his bloody little finger and broke out in anger. I will give you a souvenir. Quide punched Thales and then rushed forward to overpower him. He used the dagger to press hard onto the coin on Thales' chest. Hiss. It was like the sound of an iron cooling rapidly, except that the material cooling it was flesh. Arg! Thales howled. His scorched chest emitted a burnt smell. He felt sharp pain as though all of his muscles were burning. Quide pressed the silver coin down for a full 5 seconds. He then stared at Thales' painfully distorted face before feeling that he had vented enough and released Thales. As soon as Thales broke free, he pried off the silver coin that was stuck to his chest despite the fact that it was still burning hot. The charred flesh, blood, and the silver coin fell onto the ground with a thud. A drop of Thales' blood fell on the ground and quickly evaporated. Thales simply lied down on the ground. His tears poured endlessly. Damn. Wasn't I supposed to be an adult? Why do I still cry? What a pity. Swallowing it or pushing it against the eye would have been better. Quide carefully picked up the silver and threw it into the fire. Never mind. Let us do it again. Thales closed his eyes tightly. The burning pain in his chest had not diminished. Instead, it grew increasingly painful. It was like an onslaught of pain, it was growing. Let me cut out Quide's throat. That would be great. He said silently in his heart. When Thales opened his eyes again, he just stared at Quide indifferently. Quide looked at those lifeless eyes and got bored. Hey, brat. Don't want to play anymore? Quide kicked Thales. Thales simply looked back at Quide coldly. Come, he thought, this time, it would be the eyes and nose. Up to you. Either way, ever since I transmigrated, I could not accomplish anything, right? Quide looked at Thales' eyes and confirmed Thales' indifference. When he was still a debt collector, he hated debtors that had this expression. This meant that no matter how he tortured them, he would not get any money. Quide spat, feeling bored. He felt as though his delight had been destroyed. I have wasted too much time. However, when he turned around and saw the 2 beggars in the walls, his eyes turned bright again. Coria was crying and Kellet glanced fearfully. Quide stretched his hand out to one of the 6 holes in the 6th house, reaching out for the youngest girl. Thales' pupils immediately refocused. Sinti looked at the scene alarmingly. Even Ryan forgot about his broken hand and raised his head. No. No. That's Coria. She is the youngest here. That child. The burning feeling in his chest grew hotter. His muscles seemed to burn. Coria simply wailed. She was only 4. Bastard. How dare you? Coria. Demon. Come to me. You dare. You wouldn't. Thales, Sinti, and even Ryan, who was still holding on to his broken hand, all frantically crawled towards Quide. However, with a swing of his leg each, they were swept to the corner of the wall. You cannot hurt her. At this moment, a figure obstinately blocked the hole in the wall. This was Kellet, who had been so frightened he withdrew again into the hole. At this moment, he courageously stood in front to protect Coria. But Thales shook his head in pain. No. You're not enough. Kellet's fist was easily seized by Quide. Don't interrupt my entertainment, Quide laughed. He then cut Kellet's neck without any hesitation, interruption, or restriction whatsoever. Kellet widened his eyes as though he could not believe what just happened. Thales fell to the ground paralyzed. Ryan seemed to have a mental breakdown as he laughed and cried. Sinti simply hammered the ground ferociously. Kellet's trachea was broken and his blood spurted out of his arteries. Quide then pushed Kellet to the side. Coria wept more and more uncontrollably. Don't catch me. I am a very good child. I do not have typhoid fever. I do not. Quide held Coria's hair and carried the crying girl out of the hole like a pet. He then picked up the silver coin from the bonfire with the dagger. Bastard. Damned bastard. Thales closed his eyes and roared with all his strength. He hated himself. He hated this damn world. He then watched Quide helplessly. While the girl struggled desperately, the man took the silver coin that was heated a second time with the dagger and pressed it onto Coria's face. Sobbing sounds of the children could be heard from the side while Coria's cries were no longer coherent. Why did this happen? Thales laid down on the ground as though he had lost all hope. His eyes were filled with despair and he was motionless. Only the burning pain continued to throb in his chest. Quide worked the dagger and flipped the silver coin off the girl's face, making her scream sharply. He breathed heavily and looked around, suddenly feeling bored. Time to finish this up and go find the other brats. Wait. Wouldn't doing this be bad for the Brotherhood? Quide's drunkenness gradually began to disappear. Whatever. Since Rick and his thugs did not show up, it means that there's no problem. He closed his eyes and shook his head. He then thought of using both hands to break the girl's neck. Ha! When Quide raised his left hand, he suddenly noticed something strange. Wasn't I just using a dagger to press the silver coin on the girl's face? He did not think too much and continued to raise his left hand to place on Coria's neck. At that moment, Thales, who was lying on his stomach and had given up hope, suddenly touched something with his right hand that made him tremble. Dagger? Without any hesitation he got up, concealing his hand behind his back. Then, everything happened abruptly. In Cinti's eyes, the terrified Thales, who had still been on the ground, suddenly attacked. Go and die. The 7-year-old transmigrator released 2 lives worth of furor at Quide's neck. He made a stab and a twist. Annoying. Quide had already noticed his movements and carelessly made a reflexive push with his elbow. Thales was sent flying by Quide. Boom! Thales' head hit the edge of a hole and was instantly dazed. However, he tenaciously lifted his head and looked at his hand. There. The dagger stolen from Sunset Pub. A sharp dagger with blood on it. At that moment, everything seemed still. Quide froze for a moment. He lowered his head in surprise as he looked at Thales, who was coughing on the ground after he was sent flying. Quide's surprised gaze did not last long. He had already realized what happened to himself. He suddenly let go of Coria and touched his neck with trembling hands. A warm, moist, and sticky feeling flowed down his collarbone and onto his chest and abdomen. In full view of Quide, the damned brat Thales struggled but steadily stood up from the ground. Thales held the dagger with a trembling right hand. Although he was trembling, it was stable. At that moment, Quide felt somewhat flustered. He absent-mindedly placed both his hands at his neck, terrified. He desperately tried to cover the wound that was squirting blood, but his trembling hands and chin seemed to revolt against his intentions. The blood that was bright red like a dye spurted relentlessly from his artery. Quide clenched his teeth. He felt his legs turn soft, so he took a step back. However, this made him fall softly to the ground and no longer able to get up. The burning feeling in his chest continued, but Thales lifted up his head. In the eyes of Cinti's and Coria's fearful gaze, and Ryan's unfathomable laughter, Thales was watching Quide with staunch indifference. One word at a time, he spat out, "Go to hell, trash." Quide clenched his teeth tighter as he became angry again. However, unlike before, when the flames of fury arrived, Quide's vision turned darker. Everything seemed further and smaller before turning faint and falling apart. His eyes protruded out as though it was going to pop out of their sockets as he glared unwaveringly at Thales. He then stretched out his trembling hand that had been stabbed by Jayla towards Thales, pausing every now and again. He opened his mouth and said in a hoarse voice, "Damned brat." He swept his bloody hand past Thales' cold face. Those were blood acts. Quide wrote his last words in Errol. Chapter 6, Escape Plan. Bite on this piece of wood tightly and you will feel better. Sorry, I can only think of this solution. Thales furrowed his brows and kneeled in front of Ryan. The crippled child beggar was half lying on the floor with his upper body against the wall. Holding up his broken, badly injured, and almost torn off right hand that was steadily bleeding out, he stared blankly at Thales, who was sharpening a dagger against a blunt piece of stone. He let Thales insert the piece of wood into his mouth. Behind Thales, the little girl Coria sat on the stairs between the house and the yard with a blank expression. The area on the left side of her face, which was burned by the silver coin, was already treated with medicine and covered with a piece of cloth. She held the charred silver coin tightly in her hand. The little girl opened her eyes wide and looked at her surroundings, even raising her head to look at the moon after a moment before she let out a nervous chuckle. Behind her, Quide's wide-eyed corpse leaned against the broken wall. Thales felt nauseous. That sensation, that of thrusting metal into flesh and blood, kept returning. It would occasionally appear in Thales' sword arm. Thales sighed, suppressing the strange discomfort that came with killing someone for the first time. The burn on his chest was still aching, taking away a lot of his attention from that matter. He had to kill Quide. Thales did not regret it at all. The moment he thrusted the dagger into Quide's neck and watched him fall with all his unwillingness to admit defeat, Thales had even felt a surge of satisfaction rush into his heart. That was the pleasure of revenge. At that moment, it was as though all his grievances and hatred were soothed and released. Simple yet brutal, effective and straightforward. However, Thales closed his eyes and said to himself repeatedly, "I must not fall in love with this feeling." After all, he took away a life. He might have killed a fellow human because he had no choice. However, no matter the circumstances, it was not something to be proud of. He definitely did not kill Quide so that he can become scum like him. More importantly, Thales turned and looked at Coria. He sped up his sharpening of the dagger. What these children just experienced was most likely the most crucial point in their lives. Another vision from his past life bloomed in front of his eyes. The light from the projector and the words on the slides appeared like crashing waves. For the thesis I will be talking about in this lecture, its literature review mainly focuses on the field of psychology. From the perspective of developmental psychology, one's childhood and teenage years are the most vital in shaping his or her mind and personality. According to Bloom's longitudinal studies, the environment, interactions, and behaviors one experiences at those stages are strongly correlated to their future character and psychological development. Plenty of theoretical studies also suggest that this influence might even last through their whole lives. Thales shook his head and kept the newfound memory deep inside his heart. The psychological health of the child beggars was only secondary, the problem at hand was survival. Thales suppressed the nausea inside his heart and shifted his focus to the dagger in his hand. This dagger was shorter than an adult's forearm. It had a single cutting edge, the tip curving slightly to the side. A black leather belt was wrapped around the wooden handle to prevent slippage while both sides of the blade were smooth. Thales suddenly discovered that, after being soaked in fresh blood, 2 engraved alphabets appeared on one side of the blade. JC. JC? Thales' gaze shifted slightly and his heart jolted. No matter how many more tricks I have up my sleeves, how many more plans I concoct, or how much more intelligent I am, thought Thales, none are as useful as this dagger called JC. Thales' gaze turned icy. In one moment he was sharpening the knife edge, but in the next he appeared beside Ryan's broken hand. Cha! Thales cut without hesitation. The blade severed what little skin and flesh was left between Ryan's palm and wrist. Hoof. Ryan's whole body started convulsing vigorously like a Mariah Hill River prawn that has just been dropped into boiling water. He bit hard on the piece of wood, letting out a horrifying sound from his throat. His eyes were shut tightly from pain and his face was distorted in an over-the-top manner. Tears and snot flowed ceaselessly. Thales immediately took the piece of cloth that had been applied with medicine, though it was just some earth dragon leaves, and wrapped it around Ryan's severed wrist. He made a tight knot on it. Hopefully this will help in stopping the bleeding and prevent infection, or else. Thales looked towards the fire and shook his head. Ryan was still convulsing in pain. Thales pressed down on his severed wrist with one hand and embraced him with the other. Hang on, Ryan, it will be over soon. Hang on. Thales shut his eyes and softly comforted Ryan. Ryan's hair brushed over the burn wound on his chest, causing another fit of unbearable pain. Thales looked to the other side. Kellett, Ned, and Ursula were lying quietly under the moonlight. It was as if they were asleep. Ryan's breath started to calm. However, Coria started crying softly again. Thales sniffs, I'm so scared. Coria really doesn't have typhoid, Coria has already recovered. Thales let go of Ryan and turned to embrace Coria in his arms, taking care to avoid the burn wound on her face as he patted her gently. It's okay now, Coria. Everything is okay now. I'm sorry. I couldn't protect all of you. Thales. Thales opened his eyes and saw Cinti, who was gasping as he ran. He calmly asked, how is the situation outside? Cinti sustained the fewest injuries out of all the children in the 6th house. Life as a child beggar allowed them to pick up plenty of first aid skills such as the setting of bones, or even the breaking of bones, and after Thales fixed his dislocated leg, he sent him out to gather information. He also asked him to gather information and spread news to warn the other members of the Brotherhood who might come. No one from above is coming. Not Rick, not the thugs either. There's no one from the Brotherhood. It seems like no one from outside the abandoned houses knows about this. Cinti was the eldest among them and had worked with Thales for quite some time. He immediately answered Thales' biggest concern. It seems like Quide went to quite a number of houses, some of the children managed to escape. But, excluding our house and the 17th house, at least 6 or 7 houses show no movement inside at all. Thales' gaze dimmed. The 6th house was not the nearest abandoned house to the front gate. He could already sort of guess the fate of the child beggars in those houses. Right now, all the child beggars already know what happened. They are spreading rumors among themselves that the Brotherhood is planning to kill us all. Some of them are hiding in the houses, too afraid to come out, but most of them ran out to the streets, and some even want to escape. Thales' eyes lit up. Wait, you mentioned that all the thugs are not around anymore? Cinti knew what Thales was thinking. He shook his head and bitterly spoke, it's no use, the front gate is locked from the outside. Karak and the people from his house are shouting in front of the gate, but no one came. There's no way for us to escape unless we can cross through the moat and the thorns inside. Do we? Ryan struggled to stand up while hugging his right hand, his face was pale as he asked, do we have to escape? We can stay here and wait till the morning, and when Rick and the others come, we can tell them that Quide went crazy himself. No. Thales firmly cut Ryan off, Quide died in our house. If they manage to find the culprit, we will surely die. Even if they can't find the culprit, they will still blame it on us. Moreover, Quide's father is one of the elders in the Brotherhood, they won't let this go easily. Plus, Thales looked at Ryan coldly, do you want to wait for them to send the next Quide over? Even if the next ringleader is not someone like Quide, when he knows that his predecessor died under the hands of child beggars, do you expect him to feed and serve you well, then kneel down and beg you not to kill him? Ryan, Coria, and even Cinti could not quite understand what Thales just said. The 3 of them blinked in confusion. Thales looked at them and lowered his head in exasperation. He sighed and said, to put it simply, we must escape. Oh. The 3 children nodded their heads in unison. Thales shook his head helplessly. Another scene suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. Snow was falling on the almost empty streets. A graceful figure was skipping in front while he kept talking. Therefore, in his book, based on his observation along with historical data, which is the origination of capitalism in Europe, Weber mocked Marx's theory that the economic base determines the superstructure. Although I don't understand what you are talking about, it all sounds very intellectual. In short, it means that Weber is looking down on Marx. Oh, I see. Let's go for hot pot then. You were the one who asked me about my class today, can you not change the topic so quickly? And why is it that you can do it so naturally? It's decided then, Korean barbecue. Strike freedom, attack. Weren't you talking about hot pot just now? Hey, don't push me, and what is strike freedom? I told you not to push me dash. Thales shut his eyes tight and chased away the illusionary memory that surged back from the void. Lately, his memories had been surging back towards him more frequently, past incidents came back to his mind one by one. But please let it not be now. It cannot be now. There were more important things to do right now. Thales opened his eyes and realized that the three children were waiting for his decision. He stood up quietly and pulled Ryan up with him while taking a deep breath. First of all, we must remove Quiet from the sixth house while there is no one outside. Although he is super heavy, we can't let anyone know that his death is related to us within the next few hours. After that, Sinti, start spreading word to everyone, discreetly. You must not let anyone know that you are deliberately spreading it. Tell everyone that, at the bottom of the moat on the left side of the fourth house, 5 of the thorns are loose. Remove them and use a slab of stone or something to press the remaining 2 thorns down. That way, we can escape from the houses. Sinti was surprised. You found the secret passage in the moat? Secret passage? Ryan and Korea also looked as if they were shocked. Thales did not reply but tapped Sinti's shoulder instead and said, go. The secret passage was not dug by some senior child beggar with great abilities. This so-called secret passage was dug by Thales twice per week while he went off to beg at the western city gate, which always allowed him to return late. Using a dagger, tree vines, linen, and a corrosive agent from the pharmacy, he dug secretly for 4 years. It was totally like the Shawshank Redemption in Errol. As for that myth, it was just sheer illusion. There was never any savior, was there? Thales patted Sinti's shoulder again, and the latter nodded his head. As he was about to turn, he scratched his head like he suddenly thought of something, then with a voice filled with doubt, he asked. Why do we have to tell everyone? Can't we just escape by ourselves? If there's a lot of people, everyone will be fighting to get ahead and that will slow us down. No, Thales thought. The Brotherhood are not stupid. Every single street and corner in all 3 lower districts are full of their spies. Even the outskirt area outside the western city gates is full of their lackeys. For a few child beggars who are not even 10, even if we manage to escape, it's very difficult to escape the Brotherhood. Thales' original escape plan was due to be carried out in half a year. Within that time, he would have been able to completely gauge the pattern and rhythm of the Brotherhood spies that were placed between the 3rd lower district and Red Street Market. He would have also obtained materials from Sunset Pub and Grove Pharmacy, greatly increasing their chances of escape. As long as they can reach the Red Street Market. But right now, it was not the best opportunity at all. However, for survival, they must escape immediately. Disasters always strike unexpectedly, did they not? That was why he must turn the 6th house's private escape plan into a collective commotion of all the child beggars. If the children in the 6th house were the only ones missing, it would be too obvious, and the Brotherhood would swiftly track them down. With more people, although their escape would be slow, it was safer and more discreet. However, if he were to explain these reasons one by one. Thales raised his head and looked at Sinti. His piercing gaze made the latter a little uncomfortable. Sinti, do you remember the pact that we made 4 years ago? Sinti was momentarily stunned before he lowered his head in thought. When he looked up again, his gaze spoke of determination. Of course. Sinti looked at Thales, whose height only reached his shoulders, and said slowly, you do all the thinking, and my job is to carry them out. Thales nodded solemnly. Let's escape together. Jayla Charlton idly watched the last customer exit Sunset Pub, then she rose lazily to clear his glass. There were few customers today, especially members of the Brotherhood. Most of them were dispatched to become part of that big operation. Even the cook, Edmund, had left with a chopper. Apparently, he was going to return a debt of gratitude. The old man had not returned for a long time, either. Boring. Jayla glanced at the wall clock, it was 3:30 in the morning, still a little early. But then again, the clock was a little slow. That clock is super old, thought Jayla, even the rear compartment that holds the eternal oil is rusty. Carelessly mixing eternal oil with rust drastically reduces its efficiency. She had to think of a way to convince the old man to spend some money and get a new clock. Although Sunset Pub had plenty of businesses, no tax officers from the town council ever came to collect any tax. For the sake of the king, I will give the tax collector 2 of my middle fingers, Jayla. There were no clueless idiots who came to collect protection fees either. Each of you pay 100 coppers, and I will protect your fingers from being chopped off by me. What do you think, Jayla? Even their stocks were obtained at a discounted price through Blackstreet Brotherhood's internal sources. Nay, Rick, as the person in charge of accounts, quickly tell our brothers lying on the floor in this knife of mine what price you will be offering us for the stock. Jayla. Surely, they can afford to spend some money on a new clock? That stingy old man. Jayla shut the front door and finished up work at the bar counter. She then set down her apron and washcloth, tightened her leather pants, blew out the everlasting light on the front counter, such an ironic name, and walked into the kitchen. It was still a little early today. Based on practice, after finishing up her training, there would still be. The next moment, Jayla's countenance turned cold and harsh. She immediately lowered her body and bent her knees into a position where she can exert energy easily. The wolf-limb blade on her thigh was in her left hand in the blink of an eye. The tip of the knife flew forward like lightning. Tone. The wolf-limb blade had savagely hit a beer barrel. Only a small part of the blade stood out of the barrel, the handle still shaking. Ah! A little girl screamed in alarm. Jayla slowly straightened herself, sheathed the other wolf-limb blade in her right hand back into her boot, then lit the everlasting lamp beside her. The light flooded the dim kitchen and revealed a few small figures. Jayla, Thales, who was scared stiff by the thrown wolf-limb blade, forced a smile and raised his quivering right hand before he waved unnaturally. Hi, it's me. Jayla glared coldly at him, still silent. Her gaze was both piercing and frightening. Coria moved her body closer to Thales in fear. Jayla suddenly walked towards them. Thales could feel the three child beggars behind him take a step back. I know, Jayla said coolly, otherwise, I would have aimed at something else other than the beer barrel. Jayla went in front of Thales and yanked the wolf-limb blade, which was 2 inches away from Thales' left ear, out of the beer barrel. As if demonstrating her power, she flourished the blade around before putting it back in her boot. And, you brat. Thales rolled his eyes inwardly and raised up his hand in reflex to protect his forehead. But a slim finger was already poking firmly on it. Ah. Ouch. You must call me Big Sister Jayla. I didn't see Edmund when I came in through the back door, so I decided to check out the kitchen. They were now at Sunset Pub's cellar. The 3 other child beggars were leaning against huge sacks filled with food. Although they seemed restless, they did their best to dig into the pieces of white bread in their hands. It had been a long time since they had good food like this. Further away from them, Thales sat on a beer barrel that was twice his height. He was on eye level with Jayla Charlton, who crossed her arms and had a leg against the wall. She was languid, but still exuded her signature confidence. If he were still in his past life, Thales would have slowly admired her from top to bottom. He would then raise his head to look at the sky while savoring the memory and marveling at the world's beauty. You were wondering about what Thales would be doing after that? Bullshit. Of course, he would return home alone and do whatever he needed to do. As for now? Sorry, but his body was still too young for that. Get straight to the point. Why did you come to me? Jayla's countenance was still cold, and she immediately went straight to the point. Thales was used to that. He first met Jayla 4 years ago at the rubbish heap behind Sunset Pub. This big sister, who was only about 18 or 19 at that time, was already talking and acting that way. He knew that this was just who she was. Quide went crazy and killed almost half the child beggars in the abandoned houses. Thales spoke solemnly while clenching his fists. God. Damn. Ever since Jayla saw that these child beggars were covered in wounds, she already had her suspicions regarding what happened earlier. Without batting an eye, she started cursing Rick inwardly. This accountant, I knew that nothing good would come out of you forcing Chaka wine into Quide's mouth. Why did I agree to it, all for 10 gold coins? Half the child beggars. 10 gold coins? Jayla's expression dimmed. Besides, this incident will definitely anger the Brotherhood. No one came to stop him, nor did anyone rescue us. We had no choice but to escape by ourselves, Thales said gravely, the incident from a few hours ago replaying in his mind. Jayla said nothing and looked at him glumly. In the end, Jayla closed her eyes and sighed. I get it, you guys can hide here for a day. Don't worry, with me around, that gorilla wouldn't dare to come here. If he comes, I will cut off his hand. Jayla glanced at the other 3 child beggars and frowned. She could tell the new injuries apart from the old ones, especially the child whose right hand was wrapped in a piece of cloth. When Edmund returns, I will ask him to find Rick and the others from above. Having done something like this, Quide won't be able to escape, this bastard. Why did he not die earlier? Jayla suddenly felt dispirited. She lowered her leg to the floor and stood up. Thales' gaze darkened. He looked at the 3 child beggars and took a deep breath, then looked towards Jayla. There's some big operation going on in the Brotherhood today. I guess that's why the defenses and patrol systems are lax. To be able to escape, you guys must have, forget about it. I'll go get some medicine, and if you guys need a doctor, wait, brat, are you okay? While Jayla was busy talking to herself, she suddenly realized that Thales, who was standing in front of her, did not look right. His body was also full of injuries. His clothes were torn to pieces, and his right sleeve had fresh blood on it. This brat's gaze looked a little off. Jayla went in front of Thales and dragged him off the beer barrel. She then kneeled and held Thales' shoulder while looking straight into his eyes. Jayla's gaze suddenly turned somber and urgent. Brat, what happened to you? Thales was a little afraid to look at Jayla's eyes. However, in a mere few seconds, he managed to compose himself and firmly raised his head. Thales could hear his own voice. It was calm as usual, without a tremble. Jayla, Quide is dead, I killed him. Chapter 7, JC 5 hours ago. Lorbek Dara, 43 years old, was a Class 1 director of the city defense team, the Western Police Station, and he was responsible for safeguarding the western side of Eternal Star City. 20 public security teams, police officers of various ranks from the entire center, and countless civil servants. These people were all under his subordination. Over 100 police officers armed with superior, compact equipment such as riot control sticks, mini crossbows, and anti-force shield. Almost 300 high-quality soldiers armed with anti-mystic equipment such as anti-mystic swords, arched light shields, eternally new armors, and spell-breaking bows and arrows. Finally, he had 20 swordsmen of eradication as elite garrisons. All of them answered only to his command. All of this was seldom heard of for a low-level noble, especially since Lorbeck's father was only a little lord in the western part of the country, Kara County. If he had not associated himself with the Covendir family, he would not have become Eternal Star City's director of department for Western City Police Station at such a young age. In this splendid relationship, where he pledged fealty to the Covendir family and obtained an official position in return, there was only one tiny imperfection. He was responsible for 6 patrol areas in Eternal Star City, the 3 western districts, and the 3 lower districts. Yes, those were the front lines of the bloody battle between the Blood Bottle Gang and the Blackstreet Brotherhood. A tiny imperfection. Nonsense. Goodness gracious, this was a total calamity. Oh, he was also responsible for the patrolling of the Western City Gate along with the safety of the streets. As he took over the position, his white-haired predecessor warned him. You must remind your followers, even when they lead a team and exit the barracks, pass through the western districts, the lower districts and head towards the Western City Gate. That was right, his predecessor believed that the public security teams who were responsible for keeping the western portion of the city safe could only patrol at the Western City Gate, and that police officers could only enforce the law there. You must remember. For the sake of your money, when you pass by the 3 western districts, you must be polite and friendly. For the sake of your life, when you pass by the 3 lower districts, you must be careful and pay attention to your steps. For the sake of your position, when you reach the Western City Gate, you must be conscientious, energetic, and ready for action. Lorbeck soon understood why. The Blood Bottle Gang, who were active in the 3 western districts, had deep roots within the district and a lengthy history. They had a lot of dubious relations with powerful people in the court and regularly pay significant sums as tribute to the city defense team. That was why, for the sake of their wallets, whenever they passed by the western districts, they had to be friendly and full of joy, turning a blind eye to whatever the gang did. The Blackstreet Brotherhood who forcibly occupied the 3 lower districts was ruthless and violent. Half the unsolved crimes in the kingdom were linked to them. They did not go easy on the officers either. That was why, for the sake of survival, when passing by the lower districts, they had to be alert and observant, they must move fast and not linger without reason. The Western City Gate was Eternal Star City's facade. All the important people from foreign countries, various nobles, temple officers, and adventurers would pass through the gate while visiting Eternal Star City. Plenty of foreign affairs disputes, royal power struggles, religious clashes, and civil conflicts took place there. The elders of the monarchy kept a close eye on the Western City Gate too. That was why, for the sake of their positions, when they carried out their duty there, they must be fair, professional, and willing to selflessly serve the people. Having said that, in the 3 years since Lorbeck took over the position as director of Western City Police Station, half of his hair had turned white, and the wrinkles on his face increased by 3 lines. And because of his erratic schedule, his wife protested constantly by giving him the silent treatment in bed, and it was understandable why she did so. Right now, Lorbeck was sitting in his office, gazing out the window at the moonlight with a worried expression. He did not want to work overtime either, but a big shot decided to pay him a visit, and he had no choice but to work overtime. Also, it was not the work he was worried about, it was the brainless man working for him in front of him. Cohen Karabayan. The 22-year-old Cohen was promoted to Class 2 police officer come 3rd Public Security Team's leader 2 months ago. He had managed to do this due to several factors. 1. His fighting skills were exceptional even when compared to the swordsman of eradication. It would be even better if I can defeat that lunatic Miranda, Cohen. 2. His status was also unbelievably prestigious. Ha, old man, it would be even better if you were the king, then I could be a prince. Ouch, Dad. Why are you hitting me, Cohen? Finally, his military experience was hard to come by among young nobles. After he was discharged from the military, he became Western City Police Station's elite. Damned old man. I didn't even sign anything, why was I discharged? You must have shamelessly. Ouch. Why are you hitting me again, Cohen? They all say that it's because I have a good dad. But, old man, you must be surer than anyone else that I obviously don't have a good dad. Ouch, ouch. Old man, if you hit me again, I won't talk to you anymore, also Cohen. At this moment, Cohen was wearing a neat and stately officer cap. A few strands of beautiful blonde hair could be seen behind his cap. His blue constellation uniform enveloped him snugly, accentuating his balanced, muscular physique, and he wore non-reflective black army boots. Combined with his determined, handsome, and heroic countenance, he was undoubtedly the lady killer of the capital. What a pity, if only I were 20 years younger or dispatched to Eternal Star City earlier, the noble women would probably be screaming for me, too. These were Lorbeck's thoughts as he daydreamed. That was because the young and heroic lady killer was speaking nonstop with a tone full of honor. He firmly explained his opinions to Director Lorbeck while patting on his own chest resolutely, as if trying to convey his determination to his boss. Sir, as I said just now, I believe that it is not ideal for us to clear all our defenses at Red Street Market. Especially tonight. A huge riot might erupt between the Blood Bottle Gang and Blackstreet Brotherhood. Also, I received information from my subordinate that the Blackstreet Brotherhood will come before our headquarters and... You have spies in Blackstreet? Lorbeck's interest was slightly piqued. He yawned, interrupting the police officer. Ha, it was indeed a little difficult to place a spy among those lunatics in the Brotherhood. Cohen shyly scratched his head and grinned, but thanks to my intelligence and expertise. Idiot. You must be suicidal. Director Lorbeck's sudden outburst created quite a commotion. Even Miss Yora, the beautiful, red-headed secretary who was walking past the door with a stack of documents, stumbled from shock. Do you think that just because you got third place in the Class 1 Swordsman of Eradication's final assessment, the Brotherhood won't be able to touch you? Do you think that just because you are from the Karabayan family, the Blood Bottle Gang wouldn't dare to touch you? Most importantly, do you think that Director Lorbeck was furious, and his voice became louder and louder. Cohen, who was so chatty a while back, was stunned into silence. Just because you are more handsome than me, you can order your direct superior around? Outside the door, Miss Yora's hands quivered and dropped the documents that she had been picking back up. Director, that is a bit out of topic. Although I'm handsome, the Blackstreet Brotherhood. Shut up. Idiot. Lorbeck's embarrassment turned to anger. He suddenly felt that it was not unreasonable that his old friend was always hitting his son. Lorbeck paused to catch his breath and spoke slowly. I know how you feel. I was passionate once, too. 3 years ago, when I was first transferred here, I thought of the same thing, to one day eradicate all the crime and darkness from the lower and western districts so that the people can live without fear any longer and walk the streets in peace. But do you really think that the Blood Bottle Gang and Blackstreet Brotherhood are your average street gangs? That I only have to dispatch 20 swordsmen of eradication that have the power of 100 in each, a garrison of 400 men, and also soldiers from the patrol team to eradicate them? The Blood Bottle Gang has 2 mystics, 8 psionic warriors, and the strongest 12. The Brotherhood has 3 or 4 main assassins, 6 powerhouses, and 13 generals. Do you know how many of these people are supraclass, or even at supreme class? What if one of these troublesome ones escapes? Also, they are spread all over the kingdom. Their influence extends to the thugs, bandits, wanderers, and adventurers in the Western Peninsula. They have a flawless web of information, deep-rooted social connections, huge and impressive businesses, circles of benefits that would affect large circles of people if you touch even a single one of them, and dangerous secrets. Do you think that they are harmless herbivores? Do you think that this is a battle between the Baron Bone people and the orcs on the Western Front? Do you think that my police officers and defense soldiers have no family and children, no social connections, no worries, and no burdens? Do you think that they are a suicide squad who would sacrifice their lives for you just because you order them to? Even if the 2 gangs are eradicated, what happens to the nobles who have secret relations with them? Then what about the administrative departments that rely on the ill-gotten profits of the gang's protection fees from the people for themselves to survive? Or their yearly tributes to the monarchy? What about the impoverished, the mobs, and the unemployed who will lose their source of income without the gang's restrictions and protection? What if the people stopped praying and donating to the temples when they are no longer threatened by the gangs? Without the violence of the gangs, what will happen to the pharmaceutical, alchemical, and farming industries in our city? What if items that can only be obtained through smuggling such as rare medicine and battle supplies are no longer available? How about the adventurers, mercenaries, and psionic warriors who might get restless after losing their income? Without the local gangs working and coordinating with the government, whether in the dark or not, what happens if the kingdom's secret intelligence department can't gauge the underground activities of foreign spies? All these miscellaneous and messed up things that cannot be ignored, have they crossed your mind at all? Why do you think I'm clearing our defenses in the Red Street Market tonight? You're right, let me tell you, it's because some big shot directly told me that the place will become the bloodiest battlefield tonight. No matter who goes near it, it will not end well for them. This is why I'm not only clearing our defenses. I'm also going to set up a notice for curfew and warn everyone not to go near that place. Why do you think we are working overtime tonight? It is so that in the morning, our people can cooperate with the governmental healthcare, fire brigade, and municipal departments to clear the dead bodies from the battlefield and clean up the wreckage brought by the battle. Lorbeck stopped raging and panted, loosening his collar that was constricting his breath. Cohen was silent, keeping his clenched fists at his sides. Now, team leader Cohen Karabayan, Lorbeck paused for a moment and spoke with his normal tone. You can leave, reflect on this and think about why your father decided to send you to the most challenging police station in the entire constellation, even in the entire Western Peninsula. Also, remember to help Miss Yora pick up that pile of documents outside the door. That is all your fault. The door opened, and Cohen slowly walked out. But at that moment, his gaze was dull with desolation and helplessness. That made Miss Yora, who was still picking up documents by the side, feel sorry for him. All this, everything that Director Lorbeck said, I'm already aware, Cohen thought inwardly. He extended his hand towards the sword stand outside the director's office, wanting to retrieve his saber. If even the youngest director of the police station in the kingdom who was so experienced and sly does not even dare face these blood-leeching gangs who hide in the darkness, how can there be any change in the kingdom? Cohen slowly lowered his hand. He stepped before Miss Yora, who was crouching down and tidying up her documents. The secretary felt Cohen approach and blushed, wondering what tone she should use to thank him for his help. Hot-blooded? Cohen laughed bitterly in his heart. When I emerge from the piles of corpses at the western battlefield, this term can no longer be used to describe me anymore. This is not hot-bloodedness. Cohen lowered his head and clenched his fists. There was now anger and determination in his eyes. This is the right thing to do. This is something that has to be done. Miss Yora's face became even redder. She suddenly realized that from Cohen's position, he would be able to see what was inside her uniform, a majestic cleavage comparable to the Sighing Mountains. Also, this was very important and must be repeated 3 times. He is very handsome, he is very handsome, he is really, extremely handsome. Red Street Market, huh? Cohen narrowed his eyes. In the next moment, his features turned icy. Without even looking, he suddenly flipped over his clenched right fist, and it was as though a hurricane swept past the door to the director's office. Whoosh! When the hurricane dissipated, Cohen had disappeared. Disappearing together with him was his saber from the sword stand. Only the annoyed Miss Yora was left, furiously tidying her windswept red hair. The messy pile of documents beside her was tidied by the wind at some unknown point in time and had become a neat stack on the ground. In the director's office, Lorbeck helplessly shut his eyes and sighed. Compared to the Red Street Market, the big shot had requested something even more troublesome from him. To find out from the Sunset Believers as they passed by the western city gates the reason behind Sunset Temple locking up their inner altar. Those crazy believers. Lorbeck shook his head. When it came to religious matters, he did not dare to provoke them. Especially the Sunset Goddess, that shrew. Nope, nope, nope. Lorbeck shook his head and removed the thought from his mind. If it was 600 years ago, the Sunset Goddess Temple priests would probably have thrown him into the judiciary for harboring such thoughts. From this perspective, although the two magic empresses were also bad-tempered shrews, at least they have done something good. Nope, nope, nope. Lorbeck shook his head and again, removed the thought from his mind. No, the consequences for such thoughts would be more dire than the previous one. Back to the present. You said that you killed Quide? Jayla stared at Thales in shock, as if it was the first time she truly knew him. Yes, and Thales calmly spoke to the beautiful but dangerous young woman, making a seemingly outrageous request. Please help the four of us to escape from the 3 lower districts. Thales was not just trying his luck. Despite his 4 years of begging, his world was not just full of darkness. Apart from the few children in the same house, he also had Yanni, the helper in Grove Pharmacy, and this seemingly unapproachable female bartender. Speaking of which, was she really a mere bartender? Anyway, they were the few splashes of warm colors that Thales could find in this world. 3 years ago, if it was not for Jayla, he would have been mauled to death by Morris' angry wolfhound while looking for food from the piles of rubbish outside Sunset Pub. Morris grumbled for a long time after that, about how disloyal the angry wolfhound he had kept for 6 years had run out by itself and disappeared. Say that again? Jayla looked as though she just heard the most unbelievable thing ever. Something like the demons from hell were coming back to Earth, or the gods in heaven had descended upon the world. I was saying that I would like you to. Jayla immediately cut him off. You just killed Quide Rhoda, the firearms leader, Ironheart Shanda Rhoda's only son, the head of the child beggar business in Eternal Star City who belongs to the most fearsome faction of power in Constellation, Black Street Brotherhood. Having said that in one breath, Jayla extended her slim index finger with a furious expression on her face and poked Thales' forehead hard. And having done that, you want me to protect you and betray the scariest force in Constellation's underworld, to help you evade the Black Street Brotherhood's inevitable manhunt, and escape? Not entirely correct. Thales massaged the finger mark on his forehead while Jayla leveled him a deadly glare. He wryly smiled. But it's something like that. Jayla took a while to digest this information. Although Thales was feeling anxious, he waited quietly. Jayla refocused inside. Her expression very quickly became cold and nonchalant again. To go against the entire Brotherhood for your sake? Do you think that I'm such a good person? No, I should say, do I look like a good person to you? You don't have to show your face to the people in the Brotherhood. Thales said hurriedly, we have our own escape plan. You just need to provide us with some food and materials and help us hide from the Brotherhood's people on the roads through the 3 lower districts to the Red Street Market. For you, this is easy. Please. Thales said earnestly, you are the only one we can depend on, big sister Jayla. However, Jayla did not seem like she was buying it. You are just a little child beggar. Jayla coldly chuckled. No matter what, I am part of the Brotherhood. What makes you think that I won't immediately send you, a murderer who killed one of our leaders, along with your accomplices, to the Brotherhood? Thales was quiet for a moment. Jayla tilted her head and waited for him to answer with the ghost of a smile. Because I believe in you. Jayla froze. She could not keep up with Thales' logic. What? Because I believe in you, I believe that you are different. Jayla was stunned. Is he using the wrong script? How did he even manage to utter such a nauseatingly cheesy line? Hasn't this brat been quite mature all along? After all, he was raised by the Brotherhood in the beggar's nest through beatings. What is with this sudden? Has he watched too many stage plays in the Dark Knight Temple lately? A story of friendship between the heroine Jayla and the prophet Kaplan? Or was his head damaged by Quide's beatings? But what Thales said next after taking a deep breath stunned her speechless. I know that most of the people in the Brotherhood are scum and bullies. They are all lunatics whose hands are bloodied. They are wolves and demons in human skin. Concepts such as empathy and kindness, or a conscience and sympathy, for them, these are worth lesser than the mud found in drains. They sell young ladies who have lost their families to whorehouses and beat desperate children into invalids. They sell drugs to girls in their teens, and extort honest businessmen until they are left with nothing. They drive farmers into starvation after they had to sell their children due to natural disasters. They bring those who can't pay their debts to the desert and sell them as slaves, and they harbor dark, ugly secrets together with degenerate nobles. But I also know that a lot of them are forced to do that for a living. Some have no choice, some were influenced since young, some can't leave, a lot of them are doing it for survival. They all have reasons because they were forced into it. That is how they became the Brotherhood's most merciless and cruel minions. That's precisely why I believe that to be able to survive in such an environment while still maintaining the capacity for empathy, sympathy, kindness, and a conscience, to persist in doing deeds of kindness, being a good person, and to forego the thought of earning easy, black money through your skills with the blade. To give the most abject drunkards a free glass of beer, to give those who are beaten and abused a coat, to save the life of a child you don't know from the rubbish heaps by killing the head of the Brotherhood's beloved dog in the process, and to go on helping, supporting, and caring about that child for the subsequent 4 years. Jayla frowned tightly. She did not realize that she had started biting her bottom lip. Having said all that, Thales raised his head to look at Jayla with sincerity and hope. Compared to being a pure scoundrel in the Brotherhood, a bad person who has abandoned their conscience and happily commits detestable crimes daily while becoming a person whose cup of sins are full, I believe that it is harder, more dangerous to do all these things. Stop. Jayla raised her head in defiance. Her eyes were red. Brat, you are not even related to me, how dare you? Thales cut her off without thinking. Jayla Charlton. I have seen you chop a dog into 3 parts with a blade and cut off the finger of some troublemaker. I also know that all the customers in Sunset Pub fear you. Even the likes of Quide, Rick, and Morris are courteous towards you. When they knew that you were bringing down the price of their stocks, they could only curse in silence. I don't know the significance of the Charlton surname in the Brotherhood, but I could guess that your hands were once full of blood, too, and that you must have killed a lot of people. Perhaps, the people in your family and the ones around you are all members of the Brotherhood. Maybe all your family members have committed numerous crimes. Jayla did not cut him off. Her face became desolate and she sank into a dead silence. Actually, I don't really know whether you are a good person, or whether you can even be considered as one. Thales quietly took out a dagger. I stole this dagger from your pub, but earlier that day, I said something to you. I don't even have a knife, how am I going to chop firewood? Later that evening, this dagger appeared at the most obvious position in the storeroom. I've always known that. Before this, I thought someone else such as Edmund left the dagger there. But today, after the dagger was stained with blood, the initials JC appeared at the side of the blade. Thales raised his head and gazed directly at Jayla. The sparkle in his eyes made her heart jump. This should be the abbreviation of your name, JC. I recently heard your full name from Quide. Jayla clenched her teeth. She did not even wonder why a child beggar, who never had the chance to study, would understand the letters on the dagger and could even spell her name. Jayla Charlton, Miss JC, I want you to know, I must let you know that today, the knife you gave as a gift saved my life and the other 3 children over there, children who think that even normal white loaves are a king's meal. Jayla clenched her fists, and her eyes gradually gained focus. This damned brat. That is why, even though I don't know who you were before, and neither do I know who you will be in the future, I somehow always thought that, well, I thought that. You still want to be a good person. JC. Chapter 8, Departure Towards Fate. 4:30 in the morning, Red Street Market. The fearsome assassin of the Brotherhood, Leork, appeared on top of a residence's roof like a phantom. The next moment, he appeared at an alley beside the residence. The following moment, he lurched towards a spacious street. The floor was dyed red in blood and there were dozens of dead bodies on it. There were aces from the Brotherhood with black cloths tied around them, and members of the Blood Bottle Gang with red bandanas on their heads. Leork growled again and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was on top of the signboard of the shop opposite. It was as though he was trying with all his might to escape something that was following behind him. Battle cries can be heard from far away. Suddenly, Leork's nervous countenance disappeared and was replaced by a calm but fierce expression. The next moment, Leork's curved blade glided past his left armpit at a strange angle. Like a hunting black mamba, the blade stabbed the area to the left behind Leork like a bolt of lightning. There was no one, but Shua. There was the sound of clothing being torn. A direct hit. Leork thought inwardly. Phantom Wind follower, Ralph, he softly uttered his opponent's name. Leork picked up his curved blade and wiped the fresh blood from the tip. The nervous and rage-filled expression was gone from his face and replaced by veiled crazed cold-bloodedness. The silent assassin, Leork. It's not a bad nickname. Is your luck really this good, or could you really sense my position? An unfamiliar and gentle voice drifted over from all directions. Leork maintained his original posture and kept quiet. What a waste it is, for an assassin like you to be in the Brotherhood. As the voice settled down, a figure appeared on the street in front of Leork. It was a man wearing a grey leotard. He had tattoos on his face and had green hair. He touched his left collarbone as he chuckled. There, a wound was slowly bleeding. Leork's pupil immediately constricted. In his attack just now, the blade was supposed to thrust perfectly into his opponent's heart and was supposed to be pulled back right after the instant it cut through the veins and artery in the heart. In the end, the knife only grazed past his opponent's collarbone? Leork was shocked for a moment, but he immediately recovered his calm form, preparing for the next attack. An assassin must be perpetually confident that his next attack will be fatal. If Rick were here, he would surely scoff at Leork's nickname of the Silent Assassin. That annoying assassin, he was the one who always mocked him with the most amount of nonsense. Even if it were Thales, he would just nod and say, the Leork who battled with Felicia wasn't very silent. However, the Leork right now had a dark gaze and did not move at all, standing like a statue on the signboard. Although he did not make a sound, his presence was an unsettling one. The next moment, Ralph, who was known as Phantom Wind Follower, changed his expression. Fine, Ralph muttered. I can't believe that Karka was killed by Morris. Or should I say, as expected of the fatty, who is one of the Brotherhood's 6 powerhouses. I'm gonna go hide. But don't get me wrong, our game is not over yet, silent assassin, but... The next moment, Ralph disappeared. At the same time, Morris, who was one of the Blackstreet Brotherhood's 6 powerhouses and the person in charge of the human trafficking business, appeared at the corner of the street with a fierce expression on his face. He had a group of elite fighters with him. Boss. Leorc flew down from the signboard in an instant and saluted Morris. It was Phantom Wind follower Ralph. The big-sized Morris nodded and threw a corpse onto the floor. It was a muscular man who looked like he was in extreme pain before dying. If the Brotherhood's exclusive doctor, Ramon the Strange Doctor, were here, he would be able to discern quickly that the muscular man's lips are purplish, with blood surging towards the corner of his eyes, and that his nails are pinkish. This man from the Seal Prairies in the Eastern Peninsula, Battle Wolf Karka, who was a psionic warrior from the nomadic tribes, died of asphyxiation. Have you found the other people? Morris asked with a serious expression devoid of any joy that came with the elimination of a strong opponent, even when the latter was a psionic warrior. Leorc solemnly shook his head, no. But I bumped into transparent air barriers in a few places. According to descriptions I have heard before, the assassin paused for a moment and spoke with a serious and worried tone. I suspect that a psionic warrior whom we don't know much about has gotten involved. Morris did not say anything. He only frowned. That was not a psionic ability, but an air wall. Under Leorc's confused gaze, Morris clenched his teeth with an unpleasant expression. The one who got involved was the air mystic. Leorc froze. Mystic? The air mystic? The legendary person who was one of the 2 leaders of Blood Bottle Gang? Leorc tried to recall any memory related to mystics, but shockingly realized that in the few years he had been involved in the gang, he had not a single memory directly related to mystics. All of them were rumors and legends. The mystics in Blood Bottle Gang were just like the Black Sword in Blackstreet Brotherhood. As he thought about the legends related to Black Sword in the Brotherhood, Leorc shuddered. For the sake of this ambush, which had no room for failure, the Brotherhood summoned almost all the elite fighters in Eternal Star City and assembled them into groups. The aim was to catch the opponents off guard and finish them off with one hit. However, at the beginning of the attack, the elite fighters of the Brotherhood were forcibly dispersed by numerous gigantic waves of energy and strong wind. They could not even pass through certain areas of Red Street Market. In the blink of an eye, the originally powerful elite team was divided into a multi-headed snake that could not coordinate its heads to its tail. According to the poem sung by storytellers, in the end, Kilika the multi-headed snake was killed by Raikuru the hero by having its head chopped off one by one. Judging from Morris' reaction, the team was without doubt separated by the air mystic. Soon after, Morris, the chubby powerhouse of the Brotherhood, fiercely spat out. His expression was profound but complicated. Such bad luck. Morris was far less calm than he seemed. As he was thinking, he listened to the battle cries that kept coming towards his ears and identified their positions. This was supposed to be a glorious battle where we gather all our elites and conquer Red Street Market by catching them off guard. Even though there was such a huge commotion just now, the police station from Western City made no move at all. They were probably bribed. Even the entire Red Street Market is devoid of their presence. Motherfucker, we were ambushed by Red Bottle Gang. Moreover. Morris clenched his teeth. He was thinking non-stop and his heart rate increased slowly with each passing moment. The air mystic. No one knew better than him about how scary that person was. It came. It had braved that massive risk and came. Tonight, the air mystic was not supposed to appear here. It was not supposed to know about all this. There must be a traitor. Morris spat out fiercely. After going back, I will definitely squeeze Lance's lungs out. This stupid rat, how did he even gather his information? Leorc lowered his head, making the smart move of now cursing another member of the 6 powerhouses along with his boss, who was one of the 6 powerhouses himself. But, it's the legendary air mystic. How is the boss going to defeat him? However, at that moment, Morris made a completely different decision. Morris drew a deep breath and suddenly turned. Since the enemy is a mystic, let's retreat. As soon as he finished speaking, Leorc and the others raised their heads in shock. Retreat? Morris said without a single doubt, our operation to secretly attack Red Street Market has completely failed. Completely failed? Leorc could not believe his ears. Although there are unexpected circumstances, but... The battle had just begun? You guys spread out and order all your subordinates to abandon their targets and return to their original routes with full force. Morris said fiercely. We are going back to Blackstreet. Leorc looked at his determined boss with a dumbfounded expression. A few months of preparation, and we paid such a high price. Are we giving up just like this? Is the air mystic? Leorc could not help but raise the question in his heart. Is the air mystic really this scary? Jayla looked at Thales as she slowly hid the expression on her face. It was as though a long time has passed. But Thales did not move and continued staring at her. It remained that way until the latter sighed and gently lowered her head. Stupid little brat. Jayla's face was expressionless as she gazed at the gloomy cellar floor. Thales did not even dare to breathe loudly. But the young female bartender started to quietly speak. Has anyone ever told you that? Thales listened attentively. You are very mature for your age? It was Thales' turn to be stunned. Mature for my age? I need to quickly come out with something. How did the past transmigrators handle the local suspicions? The young boy scratched his head and blushed. He spoke, embarrassed. Am I very mature for my age? About this, Jayla, I know what you mean. However, I am enjoying my single life. Right now, I don't feel like. Ding. Jayla's expression immediately became warped. She fiercely jabbed her finger on Thales' forehead. Brat, watch what you say. Also, call me Big Sister Jayla. Thales rubbed his forehead in pain. A memory appeared in front of his eyes. It was a warm afternoon. Wu Qiren. It's not like Dota 2 can't operate without you. Have some self-control. Why are you always saying the same thing lately? Hey, that line's from an anime, of course I have to, why are you signing up for the next tournament? Well, my friend is asking me to join his team. It would be rude not to. With your Dota skills? Put. You'd better have some self-control. The same line again, hey, give me my gaming mouse. Thales rubbed his head and buried the memory deep inside his head. What's going on lately? Why are there more and more flashbacks? It's a good thing that I can recover plenty of knowledge and wisdom that I only have from my past life. But the flashbacks can't always just happen during vital moments. He shook his head and looked at Jayla, whose expression had changed. He stated clearly and simply, I'm not asking for much. We only need to cross Red Street Market to reach Blood Bottle Gang's territory. From then onwards, we'll take care of ourselves. No one will know about your involvement in this. You won't get into any trouble. It's before the rise of dawn now, the night is at its darkest. Hiding from the Brotherhood's informants from the XC district to Red Street Market shouldn't be a problem for you. I wouldn't dare say that the same would apply to other places. In fact, the moment we appear, we would be noticed by the Brotherhood, but Red Street Market is the border between the Brotherhood and Blood Bottle Gang. It is the only opportunity for us to escape. The Brotherhood will definitely spend time capturing the child beggars who have escaped everywhere. When they manage to react, it would be impossible for them to come for us in Red Street Market. At this moment, Thales, who became confident and determined, let out a slight smile. Ha! Jayla sighed and closed her eyes. To head straight to Red Street Market when the other child beggars are escaping everywhere, it's not a bad plan. With my skills and experience, diverting the Brotherhood's informants is not impossible. When she opened her eyes, her gaze suddenly became sharp and clear, stern and fearsome. It was as though she suddenly became a female assassin again. Even Thales rarely saw Jayla looking like this. But do you think you will be safe when you arrive in the Blood Bottle Gang's territory? This plan of yours can make Blackstreet Brotherhood be swathed by troubles, but it is only temporary. The Brotherhood is full of capable people and their fighting prowess is strong. Even their opponents, the Blood Bottle Gang, is inferior to them. It will only be a matter of time before they find the real culprit. And where can you go after that? As long as you are still in Eternal Star City, Blackstreet Brotherhood will eventually find you. Even if you leave Eternal Star City, how would you cope if the Brotherhood's influence out there turns out to be scarier or more rampant than within this city? It was as though Jayla's words immediately struck Thales' weakness. His face paled and his body swayed slightly. True, he had not planned that far ahead yet. His capability was limited and his knowledge was lacking. What will come after they have reached Red Street Market, he could not say. But they had no other choice, did they? They can only go to Red Street Market. That would be our business, he said stubbornly after his thinking about it. Jayla, the assassin with a clever and fierce countenance, not the Jayla who was previously an aloof and cold bartender, shook her head. But this is impossible. Seeing that Jayla was still shaking her head, Thales became anxious. To obtain Jayla's help, he had used every method at his disposal, he could not fail. He glanced at the other children from the corner of his eye and clenched his fists tighter. No. This is not a game of football manager. I cannot fail. Thales raised his head and spoke with difficulty. I know that compared to providing us with food and giving me a dagger, this request is outrageous. But please look at those 3 children, all their hopes are set in this bar. Jayla, please help me. Besides. Jayla raised a brow. The boy very reluctantly spoke the following words, because to him, that was obvious coercion and torture. Thales took a deep breath. There was no other way. As a small fry, he could not begrudge the chance to let himself shine during the critical moments in a gang battle due to greed, avarice, and love for money. Besides, you owe me a favor, don't you? Thales said with a firm tone. Ha! Jayla's gaze was full of doubt and shock, but she soon burst out laughing. The bartender took out a wolf-limb blade from her thigh and placed it in front of Thales. Favor? Are you referring to the time you suggested that I modify my weapon this way? Alright, maybe I do owe you a favor. But isn't this a bit of an unfair deal? Thales looked at the wolf-limb blade. He recalled the memory he shared with Jayla. It happened a long time ago. Jayla, I thought of a way to compensate for your lack of strength and speed while attacking with the blade. How many times do I have to remind you to call me Big Sister Jayla? Go away. You're just a little brat who knows nothing about battles, has no psionic abilities nor divine arts, and knows nothing about mystic craft. Don't disturb me while I train. Jayla, I'm talking about this. Look at this picture. This design and curvature, brat, where did you get this from? It looks quite interesting. This is called the Kukuri. Whether you believe it or not, this weapon is from another world. Kukori? Even if I were to use it, I would need to give it a better, cooler name. Also, call me Big Sister Jayla. Besides, what other world are you talking about? Don't watch so many Dark Knight Temple stage plays. The people there are all out of their minds. Having recalled this, Thales shook his head and tried to chase the memory away. He spoke firmly, slowly enunciating each word. No, you don't owe me a favor for that. You owe it to me for agitating quite to the point of lunacy. For causing widespread injury and death among the child beggars and leaving us no choice but to escape. While speaking, Thales' tone was solemn. As soon as he finished speaking, Jayla opened her eyes wide and looked at Thales in disbelief. Her beautiful lashes kept trembling. How did you? Thales originally had his doubts, but upon seeing Jayla's expression, he was sure of his hypothesis. Yes. Thales nodded his head. His heart felt a little heavy. You were the one who hurt Quide's hand earlier, right? He was cursing while calling out your name. Besides, Quide might have gotten furious when his biggest humiliation in life was mentioned, but mostly, he felt shame. How did he get so frenzied that he started killing child beggars? I don't know what happened, but I am certain that Quide was drinking in Sunset Pub and somehow angered you before this. After that, for some reason, he lost his sanity and came to the abandoned houses and slaughtered half the child beggars. This was what happened, was it not? The death of half the child beggars was actually related to you. At that moment, Thales definitely saw the quiver in Jayla's eyes. This twice cursed, damned brat. Jayla cursed inwardly, but the wolf-limbed blade in her hand could not stop shaking, betraying her emotions. Way too clever. It was just a couple dozen child beggars. Jayla's heart was trembling. It was not like I killed them. It has nothing to do with me. It's all Rick's fault, that damn accountant. It has nothing to do with me. Is it really? She suddenly saw an image of a baby covered in blood. The baby was wrapped in an expensive woolen blanket. All at once, her heart felt so heavy that it was as though it could not pump any blood. That's why, please help the 4 child beggars left in front of you. Because this is a favor you owe us. Although Thales felt extremely uncomfortable, he finished the sentence while his heart clenched in pain. Jayla tightly shut her eyes and returned the wolf-limb blade to her boot. Of course, if you think that you owe me a favor because I gave you the prototype for the wolf-limb blade, you can always include it on the list. I don't mind being owed more favors. As though he found the atmosphere too stifling, Thales chuckled again. But it was a very forced chuckle. After a long while, Jayla opened her eyes. She raised her head gently. Thales, you are truly one special child. Always able to hit others right on their weaknesses. Quite probably died this way too, with one direct hit. Her tone was quite feeble, making Thales' heart pound in fear. But what she said next turned Thales stone cold. But it's useless. Jayla paused slightly between each word. To Thales, every single pause felt like it would be fatal. Even if I'm willing to help you and sacrifice my life to protect you guys, it will still impossible for you to cross Red Street Market. Because tonight, the Brotherhood will be launching a surprise attack on Red Street Market. It has already begun. Red Street Market will become the most horrifying battlefield in Eternal Star City tonight. It was as though time had stopped for a while, and took forever to return to the present dimension. What did you say? Thales asked, his trembling lips drained of all color. So, please give up. As you already know, Red Street Market has become a battlefield. It doesn't matter how strong I am, or if I possessed abilities such as the King's Wrath, it would be impossible for me to bring along 4 injured children through the battlefield of the 2 big gangs, Jayla said faintly. Thales stared at Jayla in shock and looked at the other 3 children, who had almost finished their bread. Seeing that Thales was looking at them, Coria waved happily. It was easy for a 4-year-old girl to forget pain and sadness. Don't worry, Cindy licked the breadcrumbs on his hands and tapped Ryan, who was still fearful. Thales will lead us in our escape. Yup, Thales is the smartest. Coria raised up a small piece of bread and happily continued, he can do anything. Ryan nodded with tears in his eyes, holding his severed hand. On the other side of the cellar, in front of Jayla, the boy whom the other child beggars had placed their hope and confidence in, buried his face in his hands in despair. Why is this happening? Why is the Brotherhood launching a secret attack on Red Street Market today? Why is it tonight? It shouldn't be so. An unforeseen circumstance. Another unforeseen circumstance. It's impossible for us to go somewhere else. The Brotherhood has informants in every single place apart from Red Street Market and the western districts that follow. Unless we head straight for the first lower district and go towards the sewers from there. There's a shortcut there, but it's the Iron Bat organization's territory. That won't work. The Iron Bat organization has long since submitted themselves to the Brotherhood. Go back to the abandoned houses and destroy all evidence of Quide's corpse? Impossible, the other children already know about it. We'll eventually be found out. What do I do now? What do I do now? Thales' face was greenish, and his lips were pale. His forehead was drenched in cold sweat. Jayla could not bear to see that, but she could only shake her head and pat Thales' shoulder. You guys can stay here at my place. Jayla sighed. I know someone I can trust who can hide you guys for at least a month. But no matter what, since Quide is dead, the Brotherhood will definitely come looking for the culprit. I can go and find the old man. Jayla paused for a while and said awkwardly, the Brotherhood respects the old man a lot. You guys won't die at least. But dying is definitely better than living like that. The hopeless Thales added inwardly. Sometimes, Jayla looked at Thales' desolate visage and mused about how even the clever boy had reached his wit's end. We have to submit to fate. Thales' vision blurred again. Chiron, she has already left. You have to accept it, sniff. I'm okay, don't worry, auntie. I'm okay, really okay. I know, Chiron. Sometimes, we have to accept fate. Since she has left, we will have to get over it. No one is spared from it, haha. Auntie, she. Must accept fate, sniff, accept fate, sniff. Accept fate. What is my fate? Reincarnate into this world and get slaughtered? And I have to submit to it? Hilarious. I have read so many books. Done so much research. And written so many papers. Why would I submit to fate? Suddenly, Thales raised his head, greatly surprising Jayla. His gaze was full of resolution and anger. Brat, are you okay? Jayla asked. For some reason, right now, she was afraid of the 7-year-old boy. The Brotherhood will definitely search for the culprit, right? Thales suddenly asked. Jayla narrowed her eyes. They only need one murderer, Thales said plainly as if it was something insignificant. Jayla frowned. This brat. Thales took a deep breath and spoke slowly, let them stay with you here. Jayla was completely stunned. Let all 3 of them stay here. You need to stay, too, to protect them. Tell the Brotherhood that you managed to capture these 3 child beggars. Thales spoke without emotion as if everything in front of him had lost their color. What? Jayla was a little surprised, but Thales ignored her. I will coordinate with these 3 children about how I am the only murderer of Quide, and how the 3 children are only innocent child beggars who had escaped. I believe you will be able to shelter them well, Thales continued speaking stoically, placing emphasis on the word only. When the Brotherhood gets here, tell them to go find me. To find Quide's only murderer. Silence. An unbearable silence. Until Jayla raised her head in disbelief and looked at the slovenly child in front of her. Jayla clenched her teeth and frowned. Then how about you? Do I surrender you to them? Thales shook his head. I will leave by myself. Somehow, Jayla had suddenly realized that the child had already made his decision. And no one would be able to sway or break his resolve. But she could not just let him walk towards his death like this. After all. You won't even be able to leave the lower districts, brat, Jayla said with a complicated look on her face, from beggars to shopkeepers, and from thugs to stall owners, their informants are everywhere, hidden but widespread. When morning comes, the people from the Brotherhood will capture you. At that time, you will only regret the fact that you didn't beg me to kill you right now. Thales turned his head around. His gaze was terrifyingly cold. True, he said icily. Ever since he came to this place, he had stayed in the Brotherhood's base in the outskirts for a year, and in the lower districts for 4 years. He understood deeply the extent of the Brotherhood's powers and capabilities. I probably won't be able to escape. But they will be able to live and not endure the pain left behind by Quide. No. Quide had already left them with scars that will be hard to forget for their entire lives. He thought inwardly. Jayla extended her hands and placed them on Thales' shoulders while turning her head away. Thales could feel the trembling hands that used to always be so steady and precise. No, there's still one more place that I can go. The only place possible. I knew that all along, didn't I? Thales burst out laughing. Fate is a funny thing. It's always playing tricks on you. You must try to go against it. He looked at the 3 children who had just finished eating their bread. They were looking at his direction with hope, they were not child beggars anymore. Thales turned his head back and looked at Jayla with a determined but calm gaze. Looking at Jayla, whose expression was gloomy and eyes red, Thales spoke, it's already 4:30, and the sun will be out soon. Red Street Market is quite far away. Please tell me about the location of all the informants that I should pay attention to. I have to depart now to Red Street Market. Chapter 9, Jayla's Blade, 1. It was not difficult setting up a testimony with a few children. In their eyes, Thales was indeed the hero who had defeated Quide. Thales made up some excuse and lied that Jayla would arrange everything. He also told them that no matter who was asking, they must insist that Thales stabbed Quide's neck from the back. That way, once the commotion was over, they would be safe. They can't catch me, Thales said with a smile. Coria and Ryan, 4 and 8 years old respectively, rarely had any doubts. In their eyes, Thales was capable of anything. Only Sinti had slight doubts when Thales was leaving. However, Thales thought of various ways to ensure that he honored the pack where Thales did all the thinking, and Sinti's duty was only to carry them out. After that, we should head our own way, no, we should leave. As he waved nonchalantly to the children and stepped out of Sunset Pub's back door, Thales realized that there was a bit of grief and solemnity in his heart. I won't be able to take care of you guys anymore. Hopefully, my luck is good, and we will meet again in the future. What a solemn farewell. After all, I did volunteer myself as a scapegoat. The wind is rustling a little, eh? Thales opened his eyes wide and watched as the expressionless Jayla strode with her long legs and overtook him from the back, fully equipped. Hey, shouldn't you be staying in the pub to take care of the 3 of them? Without you, they dash. Don't worry, I hid them in a dark room and left a note for Edmund. Jayla, who wore a dark gray leotard, pulled a pair of transparent goggles from her forehead and wore them over her eyes. With an annoyed expression, she pressed on Thales' shoulder and kneeled down beside him. But dash. Not buts, brat. Jayla interrupted, leaving no room for arguments. Since you have decided to handle the Rhoda family's wrath by yourself, and then go to Red Street Market to seek death while trying your luck, I should at least accompany you for a bit because of this. Jayla tapped the wolf-limb blade in her boot. Also, the hidden sentries the Brotherhood placed in the XC district aren't what a 7-year-old brat can avoid. Even if I repeat every single detail about it 100 times, you won't be able to make it through. Thales stared stupidly at Jayla and only spoke after a second. But there's a battle in Red Street Dash. Stop wasting time. Get on, we're leaving. Jayla did not add any more superfluous words, nor did she bother to explain. Her haughty expression forced all of Thales' doubts back into the deep recesses of his mind. But, to get on? Get on to what? Thales looked at Jayla, who was kneeling on one knee. Accentuated by her grey leotard, this short-haired big sister's sexy figure looked even better. Especially her breasts. Ahem. If he sat on her arms and held onto her neck, it will be like having thought that. Thales lowered his head in slight embarrassment and scratched his head. Don. Ah. Ouch. Jayla fiercely jabbed the middle of Thales' forehead with her finger again, and she did it so hard that even Thales' view of the world was shaken. As if she saw through Thales' thoughts, Jayla fiercely pulled out half of her wolf-limb blade and shot him a "don't mess with me" glare through her goggles. She fiercely spoke, "You damn brat. Stop thinking about all that ridiculous stuff. Get onto my back, I will piggyback you." The moon began sinking towards the west, but the sky had not brightened yet. However, for Reedmore, this little bit of light was just as bright as daylight. Maintain your positions. Most of the elite fighters have gone to Red Street Market today. That's why the head is even stricter with us than usual, because we are at the last fork before we reach Red Street Market. It's also the first corner the Brotherhood will pass by when they retreat, Reedmore thought. As a professional hidden sentry, Reedmore hid behind the corner of a dark alley. From this angle, he can clearly see the crossroad leading towards Red Street Market. However, due to the curfew, there was no one there tonight. His partner, another member of the Brotherhood's hidden sentry, was behind him. Like him, he was vigilantly observing every single corner. No problem, I'm in prime condition. Not a single blackfly would be able to fly over there, nor a single gray centipede would be able to crawl over here, his partner said with a punctuated tone. Very good. My period of alertness is almost up. Later, I'll go hand over directly and switch Nasri over. He should have been awake since an hour ago. Reedmore nodded at his partner. He maintained his vigilance and observation as he left through the secluded entrance of the alley. The moment he left, he was suddenly startled for a while. Just now, he sensed something in that empty alley across the way. No. Impossible. His ears, eyes, and nose had been trained by Sir Lance himself. He could recognize changes of color, refractions of light, and other psionic abilities. If there were intruders, as long as they did not have some rare fusion of psionic abilities, like those that could affect the mind, then they would definitely be unable to escape his sight and hearing. But he still decided to go take a look. Reedmore only eased his mind after a patrol of the area. Perhaps his period of alertness was over, and his mind was beginning to play tricks on him. He shook his head and returned to work. A woman with short hair and in a black leotard moved quietly from the area behind Reedmore's back. There was even a child clinging to her back. She watched Reedmore's back, then lowered her body and tapped a toe on the ground before she jumped, quiet and fast, towards the exit of the alley, where it would lead them to Red Street Market. Naturally, they were the female bartender, Jayla, and the fleeing child beggar, Thales, who were heading towards Red Street Market. Before dawn breaks, while the night lingers, an ordinary person's defenses and mental strength would be at its most lax state. This is something that even a normal undergraduate from King's Establishment Military Academy would know. For some unknown reason, Jayla could still speak even though she was running. Thales laid on Jayla's back while the latter moved through the alley with an unprecedented speed. She moved like the wind, but no sound could be heard as her feet stepped on the ground. The wind blew straight into his face and Thales could only keep his eyes shut tight as he clung to Jayla's neck. He pressed his head into the back of her neck, and Jayla's fragrance wafted into his nose. He had absolutely no idea where he was. But Jayla's voice was still traveling into his ears clearly. That is why one of the 6 powerhouses in the Brotherhood, the Sleepless Eye, Coburn Lance, who specializes in espionage, has trained a special hidden sentry unit, the Sleepless. It's not that they don't sleep, it's just that their circadian rhythm is different from a normal person's. I don't know their exact numbers, but all of their circadian rhythms don't match. There are those who rest during the evening and wake at night. Then there are also those who rest during the morning and wake during sunset, and also those who rest at noon and wake in the morning. They have all sorts of circadian rhythms. That's why Lance's hidden sentry unit could work in shifts and he could ensure that all hidden sentries who report to duty would be at their most energized and most alert state. Lance calls this the period of alertness. Lance has trained them to the extent that their senses, experiences, teamwork, and tracking skills are even better than an alert center's purebred Rudo police dog. They have one unit that is stationed in headquarters. If they encounter any important operations, they would blend into the crowd in the morning by disguising themselves. When it's nighttime, they would turn into hidden sentries and monitor all the critical entrances and exits in XC District. The 2 people we passed by just now should be the last 2 sleepless patrollers before we enter Red Street Market. Thales did not speak. He was already shocked by Jayla's stealth skills. Reedmore was not the first sleepless they slipped by. Every single time Jayla jumped to a sleepless patrol spot, she would shift from dashing swiftly to walking slowly. Thales was most awed by what was happening at the moment. Jayla moved with an incredibly strange rhythm. She would follow behind a sleepless and hide her body in shadow in the sleepless blind spot. Sometimes even in the blind spots of 2 sleepless sentries, and these sleepless would not even notice them. What Thales did not know was that Jayla was also very surprised by his performance, too. Right from the start to the end, even if they were trailing behind a sleepless, even despite the risk of being spotted if the sentry did turn his head around, Thales remained still, his heartbeat was calm, and even his breathing kept to a barely discernible level. In regards to a 7-year-old boy's self-control, he was already behaving in a manner that was far too outstanding. Of course, if Jayla had not used her bizarre movements to mask Thales breathing perfectly with the rhythm of her footsteps, his so-called indistinct breathing would have been heard a long time ago. But it was already impressive that he could do this. This child is definitely not an ordinary person. Is it a psionic ability or his blood? Or could it be it's because of both? He can't possibly be born with this talent, right? Thales' original plan was to have Jayla lure away these patrols. It was the first time Thales heard about the sleepless unit. His regard for the Brotherhood had been too shallow, and also risking herself to exposure. But now, it would seem that he had underestimated this female bartender. She was not just someone who was agile and skilled with the blade. We're here. In a corner of the intersection, Thales slid gently down from Jayla's back, reluctantly. Right before him was Red Street Market, enveloped with the night. His episode with the female noble in the velvet dress a few days ago still flashed vividly in his mind. The area and size of Red Street Market was not smaller than Black Street, the name exactly as implied. This was a famous place to find entertainment in the Western District. In truth, there were quite a few nobles who would come here. They would either come in disguise or waltz in, looking to engage in relationships that surpassed friendships from adorable and dim young girls and boys, who might or might not be willing. These nobles ranged from first-rank dukes to low-class lords from villages, lords who were uncouth and whose mannerisms were too inappropriate for them to appear in public lest they make a fool of themselves. Needless to say, there was a tacit agreement that had existed for years between the nobles of Eternal Star City and the Blood Bottle Gang. On this night, Blackstreet Brotherhood stretched their hands into this place. But it was a pity because the hand that received them was a sinister trap. This doesn't look good, Jayla whispered. Even Thales could see it. At the entrance to Red Street Market were corpses lying all over the ground. Some of them had their arms broken, heads cracked, bodies twisted, intestines ripped out, or the sternum bent outwards. Their blood dyed Red Street Market a deep red in the dark. From a distance, there were at least 30 bodies lying on the ground. Even Thales, who had just killed someone, could not help but suck in a deep breath when he saw the corpses littered all over the ground and in all the various ways they died. He tried as hard as possible not to think about it. Faint sounds of battle echoed in the distance. Jayla calmly stretched out her hand and pressed down on Thales' shoulder until he was squatting down. The last time I killed someone, I seem to have run into you as well, Jayla said with a little cheerless tone. Thales could not see her gaze behind the protective goggles, but he suddenly felt that Jayla had become more serious. Brat, from now on, you owe me a favor. Thales was stunned, then he saw Jayla touch the blades on her boots. Then, the female bartender used an incredibly faint voice, like a mosquito, and left strict orders to Thales. Don't speak, don't move. There's a real elite up ahead. He's not of the sleepless sentries. Thales' hairs rose, he did not even dare breathe too deeply and felt frustrated. He had wanted to enter Red Street Market alone during all that chaos and escape from the Brotherhood, but this was just the first station, and if there was already, he was still too naive. In the next second, Jayla suddenly took out a thick black cloth from the left side of her abdomen and pressed it gently over Thales' mouth and nose. Use this to breathe and muffle your voice. Jayla did not say more. With those protective goggles on, her expression was indiscernible. She slowly drew the blade from her leg. Thales pressed the black cloth over his mouth and nose. This was a good item, he had no respiratory difficulties from breathing under the black cloth, and the sound of his breaths was also masked. If this was in a game, it would definitely be a class-level equipment that gave stealth plus 20. Thales automatically ignored Jayla's faint fragrance from the cloth. But the next moment, he could not allow himself to relax anymore. I found him. He heard Jayla say. Then, she shot up like a bolt of lightning. With one stomp on the wall beside her, she pounced on the corpses at the fork like an arrow fired from a bow. The only thing that was faster than Jayla was the wolf-limb blade she threw. At that moment, as he breathed through the black cloth, Thales noticed one of the 30-something corpses, with its intestines spilling out of its body, and some of those intestines were even separated from its body. To his shock, the corpse moved. Ting! A freezing ray of light suddenly shot out from behind the corpse and knocked that wolf-limb blade off its trajectory. But the second wolf-limb blade was already in its master's hand, and it charged forward with Jayla as she approached the corpse rapidly. With her right hand holding onto the blade in a reverse grip, she instantly cut at the corpse. Shah! Dang! Thales recognized that sound. That was the sound of metal piercing into flesh. But before he even had time to register what was happening, his vision blurred and he saw a person staggering out from behind the corpse before he lunged forward. Immediately after, a rapier fell to the ground with a clatter. Jayla had already landed on the ground nimbly. She was positioned in a half squat, with her left hand planted on the ground. The blade in her right hand was covered in blood. That person who lunged out from behind the corpse swayed before he fell to the ground. He did not move. The female bartender picked up the wolf limb blade she had thrown with a backhand grip and stood up quietly. It was just a few short seconds. Thales felt his jaw fall slack as he watched. He knew that Jayla was very strong. Except for the dog slaughtering incident all those years ago, he only now truly came to understand just how powerful the female bartender was after seeing how she had swiftly ambushed and killed today. But Thales still did not make a sound, nor move a muscle. He had a faint feeling that Jayla had just become much more solemn. What an eye-opener. Among the ordinary class, you must be considered an outstanding assassin. As the sounds rang in the air, a tall, bald, and fierce man walked over from afar, carrying an exaggerated spiked pentamace over his shoulder. He did not even spare a glance at his deceased comrade, he only glared at the female bartender standing in the middle of the corpses. You know that your brotherhood is over, right? Everyone's in the trap, all your forces are wiped out. You won't be able to predict just how terrifying the people we've sent tonight are. The fierce, bald man let out a snort. Our task is vigilance or stopping all possible reinforcements from the Brotherhood, but I didn't expect that the formidable Blackstreet Brotherhood would send over a little girl playing with knives. The large, bald man walked into the light of the setting sun. Thales could see his face clearly. The man was missing half his nose. His nostrils were flipped outwards in a terrifying manner, and he looked like a skeleton. Thales suddenly recognized who he was. He was the bald Sven. Blood Bottle Gang's leader in illegal businesses. One of the famous strongest 12 in the Blood Bottle Gang. Chapter 10, Jayla's Blade, 2. 12 years ago, when the kingdom was in chaos and blood covered the lands, that terrifying swordsman, wielding his blade without emotions or principles, sliced out his own territory in Beanlack Street. The newly born Blackstreet Brotherhood and the capital's well-established Blood Bottle Gang were like two evil dragons that would not rest until they died. For the hegemony of Eternal Star City and Constellation's underworld, they started fighting in a battle to the death. As time passed, Blackstreet Brotherhood grew up gradually from an infant dragon into a fierce, gigantic one that had sharp fangs and claws, especially during the recent years. They were on equal footing with the Blood Bottle Gang, who originally had the upper hand. From thence, during the fight that lasted 10 years, the two gangs had gathered together a group of terrifying people outside of the kingdom's gaze and stirred up a great surge formed by blood in the underworld. During this battle, a dozen or so powerful fighters from the Blackstreet Brotherhood and another dozen skilled fighters from the Blood Bottle Gang became the people standing at the front lines of the battle, representing the group of young men that possessed the greatest hope for their future and the younger generation that possessed the greatest promise. Compared to their seniors, the three mysterious legendary assassins along with the six powerhouses who rarely attacked from the Brotherhood, the two terrifying mystics, together with the 8 strange psionic warriors in the Blood Bottle Gang, the names of these powerful youngsters were much greater, even the child beggars were familiar with them. The Bald Sven was the most mysterious of the strongest 12 in Blood Bottle Gang, a name given to them by gossipers to name the 12 young aces since there was only 12 among the new generation now. He was in charge of collecting the illegal accounts in Blood Bottle Gang. He rarely showed his face during large-scale fights, that was why no one talked about how great his fighting prowess and skills were. However, he had not stumbled in the 5 years of harsh and bloody fights between the gangs. Simultaneously, most of those who had been his enemy are now skeletons, and they were all once elite fighters of outstanding abilities in the Brotherhood. Jayla did not say anything, she merely exercised her wrist slightly. Dorno is an idiot. His idea of using corpses to lay an ambush is also despicable, but I still have to be grateful for his death, or else I wouldn't have known that we would have an important guest who came here quietly and uninvited. Sven gave an ugly smile, brought down that terrifying spiked pentamace from his shoulders, then started swinging it back and forth with his hands while looking as if he was not exerting any effort in doing so. Jayla suddenly disappeared from her spot. The bald Sven smiled without a care, then turned around and swung his arm fiercely. Cling! Clang! The spiked pentamace, twice the size of a normal person's arm, crashed into 2 wolf limb blades causing Jayla, who had suddenly laid an ambush by rushing to his lower left side, to lose her balance before she was sent flying backward. Thales' heart clenched. Fortunately, Jayla gained her balance midair and performed a beautiful backflip before she landed on the ground. The bald Sven gritted his teeth and swung his weapon as if he was swinging a baseball bat from Thales' previous world. What terrifying strength! Thales was suddenly slightly curious. If he just had enormous strength, then why was it that Sven was rumored to be so mysterious? What fearsome speed, but if I knew about your existence, I can just rely on my instincts in battle, and blocking you isn't really that difficult. Sven's hideous nose looked terrifying as it trembled due to his laughter. Jayla did not speak. She only disappeared from her spot again. In the next moment, she appeared before Sven's left leg with her body bent. Both blades were brought out. But Sven only made a light tap with his foot and moved his body sideways before he acted on habit and brought his mace crashing down again. Bang! The spiked mace crashed into the stone pavement and debris flew in all directions. Jayla rolled out of the dangerous spot and avoided that fatal strike. So there is a blade that's created in such a curved manner? It's an uncommon weapon, that's for sure. Come, lassez. It doesn't matter whether you are a killer or an assassin, that ambush you are so proud of is useless against an enemy who is prepared. Jayla crouched down on the ground as if she was thinking of a strategy. What would you do? You wouldn't be thinking of charging forward, right? After all, this is the only way for you to enter Red Street Market. Sven continued using words to interrupt Jayla's thoughts. Thales grew even more nervous in his heart. He knew that Jayla was currently his only hope in getting through Red Street Market and escaping from the Brotherhood, but he was even more concerned about Jayla's safety. He was also worried about Sven's mysterious reputation. Jayla's expression was hidden behind her protective goggles, but she seemed to have come to some sort of conclusion as she stood up slowly from the ground. It has been many years. Jayla laughed bitterly at the bottom of her heart. Do I still have to use the skill? Thales swallowed nervously. He had borne witness to Jayla's agile, phantom-like movements and her terrifying speed, but would her wolf-limb blade be effective against the bald Sven, who had grown perceptibly in terms of physical strength? Within the next moment, Jayla flipped the wolf-limb blades in her hands at the same time and made it so that she was holding the blades in a forehand grip. And then, Jayla no longer disappeared. She charged straight towards Sven. Thales almost cried out. One of the blades was positioned in front and the other right behind. The one in front went straight for Sven's throat, and the blade at the back seemed directed to the spiked mace. Frontal assault? You're just asking for death. Sven shouted in excitement and swung the mace towards Jayla. Who? The spiked mace carried the sound of wind and went charging towards Jayla's waist as she continued dashing forward. Later, I'm going to enjoy myself with this pretty wench, Sven noticed to his surprise that this time, Jayla did not block nor did she retreat. At the moment the mace arrived right before her body, she stretched out her flexible body at an impossible angle. While facing the spiked mace before her, Jayla did a forward somersault that made Thales so shocked that his jaw fell slack and marginally avoided that incoming spiked mace. Even Sven was shocked. This movement, how did she do it? Her attack had not ended. The female bartender pressed the blade position behind the other on the spiked mace and, using Sven's huge strength, jumped onto the bald man's left shoulder. Then, she swung the blade positioned in front downward swiftly. The modified curved edge of the blade allowed the wolf limb blade to cut towards the left side of Sven's neck with faster, stronger, and even fatally than a normal blade. Rip! Sven roared as he retreated. During that critical moment, he managed to avoid getting a mortal blow. However, blood still gushed out from his left shoulder. This woman, has she completely given up on defense and is using risky evasions for frontal assaults? Doesn't she know that if she makes even a single mistake, she'll die? But Jayla did not relent in her attacks. With a single tap of her foot, she continued her assault. Right before their eyes, she turned her body in the air and dodged the tip of Sven's mace with just a few millimeters between them. The wolf limb blades in her hands followed their master and sliced towards Sven as they spun. Bloodlight shone in the air once again, and this time, Jayla had cut open the right side of the bald man's ribs. Then she struck again. When she attacked head-on, she perfectly displayed her agility and flexibility. As she faced Sven's terrifying attacks, she would move and dodge every single time the mace almost struck her. There were several times where Thales even saw the tip of her nose almost grazing the rusted spikes on the mace. At the same time, the rhythm to Jayla's attack and her speed did not slow down even a single bit. In fact, she was even deadlier than when she was trying to ambush Sven. On the other hand, while Sven roared furiously with an intimidating presence, she continued attacking tirelessly and exposing herself to extreme danger. Even Thales could tell that Sven was continuously injured, and blood continued pouring out of his wounds. He was already having trouble coping with the situation and was struggling. I can't continue like this, Sven thought in panic. How could she not make a mistake while dodging minimally? Clang! Sven roared and used all his strength to block the attack. With a disheveled side roll, he dodged it and rapidly widened the distance between them. Now, imagine a big man built like a bear being forced to roll on the ground by a slender girl only 2/3 his size. This is swift killing blade. This sentence was like a stone that struck the surface of the water and interrupted Jayla's continuous onslaught, causing her to stop moving. The skills you used to kill Dorno previously should be the assassination blade and the instant kill blade. Sven panted harshly with fear rife on his face as he shouted in disbelief, I've only ever seen the blood chant Lord Charlton use the swift killing blade before. You are a member of the Charlton family, who are known as the Assassin's Flower. Jayla was kneeling on one knee, not saying a single word. This seemed to be the posture she favored to gain leverage. At that moment, she was only looking at that big man coldly. This is impossible. Sven seemed to have experienced some sort of blow. His face was pale and his lips were quivering. The members of the Charlton family have already fled Constellation and disappeared into another country when Kessel V inherited the throne. Why would one of them appear here inside with the Brotherhood? In his disbelief, he continued, the order of arrest and rewards have spread throughout the entire Western continent. With the crime of killing a member of the royal family on your backs, how dare you still come to Eternal Star City? Aren't you afraid of being surrounded by the army and the royal guards? It doesn't matter how strong the Charlton family or Blackstreet Brotherhood are. Did you think they would be able to bear the wrath of Iron Fist King and all of Constellation? However, the bald Sven's angry words immediately turned gentle within the next second. If I die here, your identity will definitely be exposed. The kingdom's secret intelligence department will receive news about the return of the family that killed our king to Constellation tomorrow morning. Kessel V will definitely not let you go. He will get rid of every single descendant and bloodkin of the Charlton family. You can let me go, he whispered softly, and his voice had gained a pleading edge. I don't care about the Blood Bottle Gang's mission anymore. Just go, as long as you spare me. I promise you that tomorrow, no, I will leave Constellation tonight itself. I won't tell anyone your secret either. I know about your capabilities. I don't want to provoke the Charlton family. But in the next instant, Jayla once again pressed forward and arrived before him. Cling, ching. This time, Sven blocked the first strike, but that sword seemed to possess life and changed its direction in a bizarre fashion. Once it struck his mace, it moved around it without using even a single ounce of strength. Jayla's head and chest also spun and changed directions, just like a live ribbon, and she moved around the spiked mace before her. Like a human body driven by the current, Thales thought in his heart. What's going on? Sven thought in shock. Why can't I block this blade's trajectory? The blade in the female bartender's right hand did not stop. Once it changed direction, it returned to its original trajectory once again and headed for Sven's throat with even more lethality. Until it cut into his throat. Blood poured onto the ground. Sven watched Jayla wiping off the blood on her blades on his clothes while completely uninjured herself before she quietly tucked away her blades. The spiked mace from the bald Sven's hand fell gently on the ground. What is this, sword technique? Sven struggled, wanting to finish that sentence before his body fell to the ground. But Sven had no energy to finish the sentence. During that instant, Thales seemed to have returned to 4 years ago. The unconcerned woman before him in the garbage dumps behind Sunset Pub had been swinging the blades in her hands and asking him a question while he stared in shock. Using ceaseless killing blade to slaughter a dog is a waste. Hey, brat, do you want to eat dog meat? If you call me big sister, I'll let you eat dog meat. Ceaseless killing blade. Thales knew that this was ceaseless killing blade. The last being to have suffered this sword technique had been a huge angry wolfhound that had run into some conflict with Thales. We were just having an intense debate of whether humans should be added to the angry wolfhound's list of consumable things. I'm very grateful for you supporting my opinion, big sister. So, dog meat, Thales. Jayla's skills shocked him once again. However, what sent Thales into an even greater state of shock was the truth about the assassin's flower, the Charlton family, which the bald Sven had spoken about. They killed a member of the royal family? Assassin's flower? The family that killed the king? He talks too much. Jayla stated coldly as looked at Sven's corpse. So much for the so-called strongest 12. Once she finished speaking, she called out to Thales, who was hiding in the dark. Let's go, brat. Thales moved past the bald Sven's corpse and looked at his eyes, which were left open in his death. Even up to now, he still did not understand how Sven, who was only physically strong, big, and was missing a nose, could be the most mysterious existence in the strongest 12. Was it because Jayla was too strong? He shook his head and walked towards Jayla. The two of them continued towards the battlefield between the Blood Bottle Gang and the Brotherhood. He sneaked a glance at the side of the female bartender's face, and Thales decided very intelligently not to ask her about the Charlton family. Well, I also have my secrets, the boy thought. And my secret is bigger than yours. At the same time, in Sunset Temple's inner altar, a middle-aged noble with grayish-white hair was waiting while he sat on a stone chair in the lower section of the inner altar. He seemed calm, but was in truth scared in his heart. His gaze never left a small offering lamp that was burning continuously on the altar. It was as if he was afraid that there would be a sudden change to the flames in the lamp. There was an elderly priest completely devoted to prayer beside him. He was quiet and pious. This made the middle-aged noble remember Yodel. He was a terrifying man who was as quiet as this priest was. In fact, he was overly quiet. Even His Majesty was confident of Yodel and believed that he would never hesitate when he made a move. However, that man, who always hid behind that purple drop crystal mask, had worked with him once when he was younger, and it was not a happy memory. He should have long since found his target with his efficiency. That man was someone who had his own creed. After all, while he had served under His Majesty's will, that Yodel Cato, that mysterious man, was only serving under His Majesty for the benefit of the king. It was the difference between the sky and the earth. Yodel, did he really know or understand when His Majesty hoped he would attack? Before long. The bald Sven's corpse suddenly twitched. Then, the area around his neck, as well as the wounds around it, started rapidly recovering. It continued until the man got up on his feet with much difficulty. Damn it! Sven cursed and touched his spiked mace. A member of the Charlton family has appeared in Eternal Star City. This news alone can get me 10 gold coins from the town hall, but... Sven touched the wound on his neck that just healed. His life was more important. Fortunately, that woman was in a hurry and did not bother to turn back and check. There was naturally no need to go into detail about his battle prowess and skills. It was one of the reasons why Sven was one of the strongest 12 in Blood Bottle Gang, but more importantly, he had a self-healing ability that no one knew about. It usually helped him turn the tables against his enemy at the instant they relaxed their guard and allowed him to win. As long as your head, well, more accurately speaking, as long as your brain isn't damaged, then you can return from the dead. These were the words spoken to Sven by the true powerhouse within the Blood Bottle Gang, the Blood Mystic. Congratulations, undead Sven. There's that boy, too, the undead Sven thought. When he was in that state of fake death, he saw a thin and frail boy appear from the corner of the street and walk away with that woman from the Charlton family. This was also something strange. A child that could follow a woman from the Charlton family was definitely not an ordinary child. Was he some sort of genius? Did he have an ability that could turn the tides of battle? Was he some sort of biological weapon? Could he attack and kill in large areas? Was he some sort of immortal non-human specimen? The boy looked young, but could he actually already be hundreds of years old, and maybe near 1,000 years old? Sven hefted the spiked mace onto his shoulders and frowned. Once I send the news to the air mystic, I'll... But his thoughts were interrupted. by a strange person in a strange mask who suddenly appeared before him. His apparition before Sven was unexpected. "You saw that boy," the strange masked person said. His hoarse voice made it difficult to discern who he was, and the words he said was not a question, but a statement. Who is he? He did not even notice. He hit his tracks. Could he also be from the Charlton family? That strange mask seemed to be made from a dark purplish hard metal. The edges were clear and there were 2 holes drilled into the spot where the eyes should be. It was covered by a circular lens made from crystal drops, and there also seemed to be a yellow bronze machine set up behind the lens. The reason why Sven could think so much was simply because he had nothing else to do. That person with the dark purple mask was holding onto a short sword where the part connecting to the hilt was crafted in a crisscross manner. Under its master's control, this short sword reopened the wound that had just healed on Sven's neck. The instinct to dodge did not even register in Sven's head before his throat was slit open. Twang! Sven fell down once again with his spiked mace. How unfortunate. Sven thought, fully prepared to welcome his next death and subsequent resurrection. However, in his state of pseudo-death, Sven discovered to his shock that the masked person did not leave. That strange masked person had a barely noticeable crease between his brows behind the mask. He slowly crouched down and stared at Sven's wound intently. After a moment, the strange masked person nodded, as he had understood something. In Sven's perceptions, he discovered to his despair that the masked man was brandishing the sword short in his right hand lightly to make a beautiful sword stroke. No! No! Sven roared fearfully in his heart. Then, Sven watched the strange person plunge that short sword lightly through his temple and straight into his brain with one fatal strike. He pulled the sword out. There was not even a drop of blood on the smooth surface of the blade. Only the head, more accurately speaking, as long as the brain isn't damaged, you can return from death. In his daze, Sven seemed to hear the blood mystic's words again. From then on, the bald Sven, one of the strongest 12 in Blood Bottle Gang, the man who was known as the undead Sven among the inner circle of the Blood Bottle Gang, did not wake again. The strange masked person crouched down and swept his right hand through a sword mark on the ground. It was a mark left behind by Wolflin blade when it stabbed the ground. He stood up. And then he vanished. Just like a ghost.